I know you are all very excited for your semestral break, but one last thing. Pakipasa sa akin ang mga notes na naisulat nyo while I was discussing the whole semester. I know you were all jotting down notes while I was discussing, so I am expecting that I will see something tomorrow. And of course, just to remind you, the deadline of our last plate will be on Friday on or before 12 midnight. I know you all can do it. Goodbye and good luck sa mga plates nyo. Kaya niyan. Happy end of the semester. Cheers.
Thank you po, sir.
Thank you po.
Have a nice day.
I don't wanna sit in a get with you, baby, tonight. I don't wanna love, I don't wanna fight. I don't wanna have to tell you all the things I know. I don't wanna stay, but I don't wanna go.
Kaya sarap nga naman balikan ang mga simpleng bagay na ginagawa natin noon. Gumagala, kasama ang iyong mga kaibigan dahil maagang natapos ang inyong klase. Naglalakad, kasama ang inyong mga kamag-aral para maghanap ng mga kainan.
Hi kay Mama. Hi
I
kay
don't
Mama
wanna
Kate.
wanna keep you from home.
Umuupo sa silid-aklatan at di sinasadyang makaidlip. At kung minsan pa nga, makukuhanan ka pa ng litrato habang ikaw ay tulog. Nagmamadaling maglapat ng papel sa hilera ng mesa sa pasilyo. Pinipilit makipaghabulan sa bawat segundo ng oras. Nag-aapurang gumuhit ng bawat linyang tila ba magdidikta ng inyong kapalaran.
Hi guys! Andito kami ngayon sa hallway. Matas bumagsak sa
Minsan naiisip natin na tayo mag-isa lang. Pero nariyan sila. Isang lingon mo lang, nariyan sila sa tabi mo. Mga kaklase mong gumagawa, mga kamag-aral mong dadamayan ka, mga kaibigan mong masasandalan mo anumang oras. Kahit mahirap, kahit mahabang proseso, kahit nakakapagod, may oras pa. Sa pagpasok at pag-uwi noon, sasabak sa mahabang biyahe, mabigat na trapiko, siksikan at mausok, bitbit ang napakaraming materyales na napakahirap dalhin. Pero sama-sama kayong maglalakad papunta sa sakayan. Kung minsan pa ay maghihintayan para lang sabay pumasok. Sa mga oras na nangangamusta ka ng plate ng iba kahit hindi pa tapos ang iyo. Sa mga oras na nanghihiram ka ng white ink dahil nagkamali ka ng linya. Sa mga oras na magpapagising ka dahil sinabi mong iiglip ka lang sandali. Sa mga oras na magpapasabay sila ng pagkain kahit hindi mo alam paano bibitbitin. Sa bawat oras na ito, nabuo ang ating samahan. Nakilala ang isa't isa sa gitna ng patuloy na pagsubok. Pagsasamahan na kahit anong pandemya ay walang makakasira. Pagkakaibigan na hindi magbabago. Simula noon hanggang ngayon.
I don't wanna fight. I don't wanna have to tell you all the things I know. I don't wanna stay. I don't wanna go.
doon?
Meron!
Sino?
Yes! Good afternoon, Arkistas! And welcome back to
PLM Architecture YouTube channel. Yes, hello everyone. We are now on the fifth episode of this webinar series, and we know that you've all been waiting for this every month as exciting topics and great speakers fill our Sundays with so much learnings. Ayan, guys, hello! Namiss niyo ba ang arkitekturo? Nagbabalik na kami. Hello! Yes, ikaw ba partner na mismo ang arkitekturo?
Of course naman, ate. Every month ko to inaabangan.
Yes, yes. Mabuti naman. Ayan, na-miss rin namin kayo. Kaya naman ngayong month of May, kami ay nagbabalik arkitekturo with the theme of National Heritage Conservation. Dahil ang month of May is the month of National Heritage Conservation. But of course, yes, we were able to hold a webinar now with that theme last month of April. Yes, you can access that on our YouTube channel as well. Kaya naman ngayong May, ngayong episode, ang ating focus is of course appreciating Philippine architecture. Yes, but for now, we would like to know how you guys are feeling today. Yes, we hope you're having a wonderful day today, everyone. Yes, kamusta naman ang midterms? Kamusta naman kayo ngayong midterms, di ba? Kasi usual na tanong sa atin, kamusta yung midterms? Well, walang nagtatanong kung kamusta kami ngayong midterms. Pero ayan, kamusta kayo guys? Paki-comment na lang sa ating comment section right here ang inyong mga thoughts, ang inyong mga muni-muni, okay? And then also, include nyo na rin ang inyong college. If you are from PLM, kindly include which college you are from and as well as your year and your block. And para na mabigyan ka namin kayo ng a shout-out later. And of course, if you're from another university, kindly comment it down below. Ayan. Siguro for now, no, we would like to acknowledge as well the other universities na nag-sign up sa ating webinar. Nako, ito partner, nakakatuwa talaga dahil iba't ibang universities ang nag-sign up para sa free webinar na ito. Hindi lang ang mga taga PLM Kaup, ano? And of course, we have here the Lyceum University of the Philippines, Cavite, Mapua University, iba't ibang chapters and areas of UAPSA, University of Northern Philippines, Nueva Ecija University of Science and Technology, and marami pa bang iba, partner? Go ahead, take it away.
Of course, mahaba pa ang listahan and kasama dito ang FEU, San Sebastian College, PUP, Valenzuela National High School, TIP, University of Mindanao, Adamson, UP Dalaman, and many more. And dahil dyan, we'd like to thank you guys for attending today, and we assure you that today's episode is going to be full of wisdom as we appreciate Philippine architecture as this month's theme. Once again, good afternoon, everyone. I am Holy Garcia.
And I am Angeli Pastrano, your host for the fifth episode of Arkitekturo, an online lecture series presented to you by the PLM College of Architecture and Urban Planning Student Council in cooperation with the PLM College of Education Student Council. Ayan! Hello everyone! Hello sa ating mga viewers! Ayan, nakikita natin sa ating live comments right here ang mga nag-cheer para kay Miss Ma'am Holly. Yes! Hello po sa inyo. Ayan. And sa mga nakikinig, pinopodcast itong episode na to habang gumagawa ng plates. Yes, good luck everyone. Good luck sa inyo, okay? Ayan, we know you guys are as excited as us for today. So, let's not wait any further.
That's right, Ate Angeli. But first, we would like to thank our generous sponsor and partner who made this episode possible today. Huge thanks to Itones Ph. Itones Ph, be your own zone. Kindly visit their Facebook page, Itones Ph, and their Instagram at Itones Ph. And of course, once again, thank you to the PLM College of Education Student Council for partnering with us today. We would also like to remind everyone watching with us today that those who are able to register to the forms posted in our official Facebook page for this webinar will receive an e-certificate of participation, which will be sent to their emails within the next week.
Yes, that's right. Thank you for that reminder, partner. Ano? So, sa mga nakapag-register, don't worry dahil makaka-receive kayo ng e-certificate. And of course, you guys, you can tweet us with the hashtag #Arkitekturo_F5. Ayan yung spelling. Nakikita natin sa ating screen. Pwede nyo i-tweet ang inyong mga thoughts, ang inyong mga questions with that hashtag. And tag us on your IG stories with your creative snapshots. It's at 𝐀𝐫𝐤𝐲 Official on Twitter and Instagram. And don't forget to like and follow our official Facebook page. It's PLM 𝐀𝐫 Student Council, and support our One View, One Step Forward campaign by subscribing and watching our videos here on YouTube. Okay? You can also go ahead and follow our partners Facebook page. It's PLM College of Education Student Council.
All right, let's begin with our webinar proper. Just a few house rules. If you have questions regarding our topic, kindly type them in our comment section or save them up later after the discussion. Please remember to keep your comments professional and relevant to the topic. So now, allow me to introduce you of our first guest speaker, who is a licensed architect from the Leandro V. Locsin Partners, graduated from the University of the Philippines with a distinction of Outstanding Thesis in 2014. And as of today, he is a professional member of the United Architects of the Philippines, the American Hypnosis Association, and the International Sports Sciences Association. Not only that he excels in the architectural field, but also in the health allied field, as he holds numerous certifications for neuro-linguistic programming, therapeutic imagery, fitness, nutrition, and a lot more. He was also involved in different projects as well that require spanning property development, school renovations, residential developments, and the like. In addition to these, he oversees and manages the LP's historical archives and educational initiatives, and has given lectures on topics such as architectural design, history, psychology, and hypnotherapy for companies and universities all over the Philippines. His goal is to use his time to ease people's pain and help them move forward in life. To talk about archisophicals, zeal in design, the philosophies in Philippine architecture, let us all welcome Architect Aldo Mayoralgo.
Hey, hello
Hello.
po. Good afternoon,
Hello, good afternoon
architect.
everyone. Thank you, Angeli. Thank you, Holly. Gusto kayo? Sige. I'll share my
Yes.
screen now.
Yes po, go ahead, architect. You may proceed
Sige.
po with your presentation, and we'll see you po later.
See
Thank
you
you
later.
po.
Okay. Just let me know if you can't see it, no? Okay, full screen ko na.
Okay po, sige lang po.
Okay na ba? Kita
And
na.
as of now po, hinintay pa lang po natin. Wala pa po
Sige.
lumalabas. Alright, that's it na po. Meron na po, architect.
Okay, thank you. So, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming out on a Sunday, no? The title of my talk today will be The Stories We Tell. And it will be a very different talk, medyo fast-paced siya. And it will be interesting because the first third won't be about architecture, but about big history and humanity. But to me, this is very important because a lot of the time, parang we're so focused on the architecture that we forget the deep roots of why architecture exists in the first place. And deep thinking is the cornerstone of good architecture, so that is what I'd like to share with you guys today, no? Sige. So the first question I have for everyone is, when was the last time you had a deep conversation? I'm not talking about the pleasantries you exchange with your friends in social gatherings. I'm also not talking about the God-level memes you share with your friends as well. Rather, I'm talking about the deep conversations that you have between you and another person that brush over and delve deeper into topics such as humanity, history, meaning, and impermanence, and our role in this world. And very often, it's hard for us to have these kinds of conversations in this life, no? Because we have a very fast-paced world today, and we are our senses are entreated by so many stimuli, whether it's in the physical world or in the space of the screens in our hands, or from the different coordinations and correspondences we willingly engage in on a day-to-day basis. And we're complicit in this, especially when we go scrolling through multiple social media feeds. We're overwhelmed by all the information. And this has effects on our brains and how we experience life and how we experience our minds. And so today, so that we don't run the risk of sort of going even deeper into this, I'd like to first stop and let's take a break and clear out the gunk and delve deep into one topic and look up to the stars and think about the things that the ancient Greeks used to think about and talk about it. Let's talk about the bridging of different perspectives on the very high metaphysical and meaning level. and think of narratives that touch you and stick with you for the rest of your life. Okay, so we'll be talking about stories of meaning, and we're going to be doing it through a sort of deep conversation between myself and you guys. And I believe that deep conversations with the right people are priceless, and everyone can be a right person. In other words, everyone has something that they can teach another person depending on their own background. And for me, I have a very interesting background. I'm trained in architecture, but also in hypnotherapy. So I've studied the space out there in the world, but also the space in our heads. And so today, I'd like to red pill you a little bit and bridging these two perspectives. And to do this, we'll start with the first part, which will be a little bit of a ride. Again, it will be very, very fast-paced. If you have any questions, just feel free to put it through the question and answer. This is more for opening your mind rather than being so parang fixated on the little details. Okay. The first question, this first third will be, how did we get to where we are? So we tend to take for granted the world that we live in today as sort of self-referential and always there. But in truth, we are the only animals on this earth that can ask the universe questions. And we tend to forget that. How we got to this point in our humanity. And to cover this, let's tell this story first. And to do this, you're going to have to talk about big history from the very start of the universe to this instant today. And one of the best ways we can sort of think about it is to use what Carl Sagan called the cosmic calendar, which is a thinking tool, and this is how we go about it. Imagine that in a calendar of 365 days, the instant that the universe was created is 000 AM on January 1. This was a Big Bang. And this current instant right now, 2021, May 23, at the current time, is 11:59 PM, the instant right before the new year on December 31. Okay. If we conceive of everything that has ever happened through this cosmic calendar, this is how things would look like. And it tends to be out of scale with what we feel the universe was. Okay. So on the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 months in the cosmic calendar, the only stories that were present were physics and chemistry. The universe was forming with the gas clouds and the like. Stardust that once formed the universe is now present in our own bodies. And we are just on one planet, one pale blue dot, in one galaxy out of billions and billions in this universe. For the next 3 months, from September to November in the cosmic calendar, a new story came to be, and this story was called biology. And the thing about biology is there's this complex web of life through natural selection, and it started from the first single-cell organisms, bacteria, and archaea. And a great book to read up if you want to learn more about this is The Tangled Tree by David Quammen. And it talks about how these single-celled organisms used horizontal gene transfer and reproduction to move forward into evolutionary lineage. And it was only on December 15 of the cosmic calendar, December 15, the entire year passed, when there was an explosion of life to life forms that we are familiar with today. It was called the Precambrian explosion, and this is when things like sponges and worms and mollusks and starfish came to be, only here. It was only here that the fossil record started to come into existence. And from December 16 to 28, life was just like this, very, very simple. Something very interesting happened during this period, no? We know it to be the age of the reptiles, and essentially the dinosaurs were the kings of our world, and they were more feathery than we once expected them to be. But on December 29, something very interesting happened. The fifth extinction, which is commonly attributed to this asteroid that fell into the Earth, no, and wiped out the dinosaurs. And we tend to forget that this was again the fifth extinction, so it wasn't anything new. It has happened many, many times. And we tend to forget, putting it into scale, that over 99.9% of everything that has ever lived has gone extinct. They no longer exist. We are part of that 0.1%. And the dinosaurs weren't so lucky, but our lineage, of course, the mammals, were able to take advantage of the situation And from December 30 to 31 on the cosmic calendar, this was the rise of mammals, the rise of our lineage. And sure, we know the mammals, we know about the great apes and the like. And again, we are just one of these species within this sort of group, no? That is us, the primates. And it is only on December 31, from 10:15 a.m., when apes started to come to the apex of the cultural evolution of the world, so to speak. So we are humans, but at the same time, we come from this lineage, this long evolutionary lineage spanning this entire cosmic calendar. And we can't forget, again, that we are closer genetically to our closest living relatives, the chimpanzees, sharing about 96% of genetic material with them. And it's only on 9:24 p.m. when the first human ancestors started to walk upright. So there are many milestones for this. So we know about the Australopiths, like Lucy, one of the famous examples that was unearthed before. And we also know Homo erectus, if you've heard of them, upright man. He supposedly was the one that had the mass exodus outside of Africa. And from there, from this lineage, we come to us, Homo sapiens, or wise man, so to speak. Now, what we tend to also forget is that there were other human species that lived alongside us. So we used to live alongside other human species, and some of us even mated with them. So you might be familiar with the Neanderthals and the Denisovians. They lived in different parts concurrently with our species, but don't get me wrong, they were a completely different species, like a horse to a donkey. So like that, no? And some of them even mated with us, and their DNA lives on through us, another human species. And it can be mind-blowing to be reminded of this simple fact. But the fact remains that from this period, it was only in the last 6 minutes of the cosmic calendar when our species came to existence on Earth. And so, let's fast-track everything. Let's think of it this way. Imagine that today is December 31 on the cosmic calendar, at the instant the stroke of midnight. This is what happened, putting ourselves in this position. It was only 3 months ago when the first life on Earth came to be. It was only 3 days ago when the first flowers came to existence. It was only 1 day ago when the dinosaurs met their end. It was only 18 hours ago when the start of primates started to come into being. Less than 10 hours ago, we were Australopiths. Around 90 minutes ago, Homo habilis started using tools. Around 15 minutes ago was when we mastered fire. Around 8 minutes ago was when us, anatomically modern humans, came to existence. And you can get a glimpse of this through some of the uncontacted tribes throughout the Earth that still exist. Around 8 minutes ago was when language came to being. Around 2 minutes ago was when the cave paintings were done. Around 30 seconds ago was when agriculture and pastoralism came to be in the scale that built civilization. Less than 15 seconds ago, for the first writing was on Earth. 10 seconds ago was when the pyramids were built. 6 seconds ago was when Gautama, Confucius, and Euclid spread the philosophies. 5 seconds ago was when Christ died for the sins of man. The Roman Empire came to its apex and the numeral 0 was invented. 4 seconds ago was the rise of Islam and the Byzantine Empire. In the last 2 seconds, the Mongols had their way with Asia, and concurrently, in the last 2 seconds, the European wars of religion wreaked havoc in Europe. And after this, in the last 2 seconds, the Black Death came and wiped out between 30 to 50% of all humans living on Earth, which paradoxically paved the way for the Renaissance. In the last 2 seconds, Johannes Gutenberg invented the printing press, which revolutionized information to an extent that I cannot even begin to underestimate. In the last 2 seconds, Christopher Columbus discovered the Americas and was very lucky. In the last 2 seconds, Ferdinand Magellan discovered the Philippines and he wasn't so lucky. In the last 2 seconds, Isaac Newton modernized physics and turned the world on its head. In the last 1 second, the age of expansion and discovery came to being. In the last 1 second, Alexander and his friends stuck it to King George, and on the other side of the ocean, in the last 1 second, the French Revolution and the rise of Napoleon showed us how these ideals could be taken to another extreme. In the last 1 second, the Industrial Revolution came to being. In the last 1 second, Marx and Darwin turned over the worlds of biology and sociology on their heads. In the last 1 second came the rise of the great scientists like Hooke, Mendel, Mendeleev, and J.J. Thomson. And on a more practical front, in the last 1 second, the great inventors came into being, like Tesla, Edison, Alexander Fleming, and Henry Ford, who invented the first commercial car. And from this spirit, mankind would start to take flight through the Wright brothers in the last 1/2 second. In the last 1/2 second, our understanding of the universe would be turned on its head even further through the great men like Albert Einstein and Richard Feynman. But also, in the last 1/2 second, the rise of nationalism and anti-enlightenment ideals would show us how extreme the world could sort of revert back into a sort of barbarism. And in the last 1/2 second, as a counterpoint, the world would never be the same again. But in the last 1/2 second, we started to attempt to rebuild. In the last 1/2 second, the modern movement started to push their ideas to the forefront. In the last 1/2 second, in 1945, the United Nations came to being, which was instrumental in peace. Because prior to 1945, all the great powers of the world would go to war with each other at a rate of 2 wars a year, which was unheard of after 1945. In the last 1/2 second, we were granted our independence, and we are sort of grappling with what it means to be a Filipino still today. In the last 1/4 second, a new kind of warfare replaced the old kind of warfare. Of course, the Cold War with Russia and the United States, with Mao joining as well. In the last 1/4 second, we showed how high human beings could soar by reaching the moon. But under those same ideals, show how low we can still go through atrocities like those in the Vietnam War. In the last 1/4 second, we started to think about rights of human beings even more in a very liberal way. In the last 1/4 second, the different rights revolutions had their headway, like civil rights, rights for women, LGBT+, and now animal rights. In the last 1/4 second, the boomers had their way of the world, this deeply starting to globalize world in an even higher rate than ever before, which would expedite itself even further with the work of this man, of course, Steve Jobs. In the last instant, suddenly we are hyper-connected. Suddenly, we have all the social media that we use to connect with each other, like this one. In the last instant, we can learn from the great masters all over the world for free. In the last instance, we have sequenced the human genome. In the last instance, we have discovered that we are more microbe than human. In the last instance, we have discovered epigenetics and how different traits can transfer through different generations based on experience. In the last instance, we learned that the brain is neuroplastic, and what we do to our brains can change how it functions. In the last instant, we have taken relativity and quantum mechanics to even further extents, so that even if we don't believe in quantum mechanics, it is still being used in the cutting edge of technology that helps us all today. In the last instant, we've again looked at relativity and quantum mechanics and seen how reality is very weird. In the last instant, we are faced with new pressing issues, of course, like the environmental crisis, like the rise of populism, like things like artificial intelligence, deep fakes, and brain transplants that raise the eyebrows of ethics and question what it means to be a human being. And that is how we got to where we are. Of course, this might seem like a little bit of a nosebleed, but there's a point to all of this. And to move further, the question now is, where are we exactly? And the answer to this, Happy New Year, everyone, we're here. Through this deep calculus that underpins where we are in this world, this story of us, we are fixated mostly on the last second, aren't we? And so we tend to spend our time looking at cute videos on YouTube, very frivolous things, but at the same time, we are also disemboldened by all the tragedy that we see all around us. So much so that we might think, for instance, that the world is really denigrating. Human beings are degenerating, and we are in the worst period in human history. The question is really, and the answer to that, if you go to great books like this that actually show the data, is that we live in the best period of human history by nearly all markers, despite all the problems that we have. Life expectancy is so high. You and your family can live past 70s, whereas before, 30s was the norm. Child mortality is down. You do not need to worry as much about having a sibling die at a very young age. Famine deaths are down. Starvation is put to the outliers of the world rather than being the norm. Great power wars again are down thanks to the United Nations. Gross world product of economics is higher by a staggering amount. The relative number and the absolute number of people living in extreme poverty is completely lower compared to before. Poverty again was the rule. Now it is the exception, and a problem that we can face with this in mind. Undernourishment is also on the decline. Basic education is on the rise, education that we can all partake in, such as this. Liberal values that care about other people and collectivist attitudes are on the rise. Victimization of children is on the steep decline. Racist, sexist, and homophobic web searches are on the decline, and I love this because this is a blind data search, so people couldn't lie about it. So you can see attitudes about our fellow human beings are improving. And as a total of all of this, despite the problems that we still have to face, the well-being composite of everyone through this sort of trajectory of historical human development is on the rise dramatically. And so, the question now is, if this is the truth, why is it that we tend to think the opposite? And there are many psychological answers to this. The first is the tone of the news. No? By the very nature of the news, and this is understandable, reporting that is on something that is negative will get more attention, and it sticks to us more. Why does it stick to us more? Well, sorry. You can see that the tone of the news from 1945 to 2010, as the world has been getting better, the tone of the news has gotten more and more dismal. Because again, as human beings, we think more in heuristics and images, and they touch us more than impersonal statistics. And there's also this thing called the GOTAM ratio, where it takes 5 positive impressions to overturn 1 negative impression in our heads. So our brains are hypersensitive to negatives, no? And so we do not think about the fact that no one died from smallpox today when hundreds of thousands would die every day in previous generations. We do not think that starvation is nearly absent because of the work of men like Norman Borlaug. We don't celebrate that every day. We do not appreciate the fact that your 8-year-old cousin knows more and has a better understanding of how the world works than some of the great ancients. We take for granted the fact that we live in the period where we can rise in our advocacies and rise in our charity in the most effective way possible because of technology. We live in the world where we can make the most difference in the lives of others today. And the ideal scenario is, through this story of man, through this story of us, is for us to cultivate good habits as we are young, grow and grow as people, and make maximum impact over the course of our lives. And there are many ways we can do this, and it just so happens that we want to do this through architecture. So this goes to the second third of our talk now, and it will talk about the stories stemming from man through the architecture that he or she creates. And so this is, of course, 𝐻𝐲𝐲𝐿𝐿. And again, I'm a project architect in 𝐻𝐲𝐲𝐿 Partners. And we start in this next part with a story, or rather a quote that encapsulates the story of Mr. Locsin. This is what he believed. A work of architecture becomes iconic only when society finds that it resonates on many levels. When it captures a spirit and an idea that is relevant to, valued by those who view it, inhabit it, and use it over time. So we, the 𝐻𝐲𝐲𝐿 Partners, is embedded in a deeper story of humanity, of course, spanning the different movements in the past 60 years or so. And so around that travertine table that the partners would gather around to create their architecture, we, the 𝐻𝐲𝐲𝐿 Partners, gather around that same table. And if you look at these two gentlemen over here, I'll go back one more slide, you'll notice that Sir Ed Ledesma and Raul Locsin are in the same relative location that they were all those decades ago. But of course, this period of COVID has sort of replaced this travertine physical table with a new kind of technological table that we all use, in order to coordinate and to tell stories with each other about architecture and design. And so, for this theme, the second part of the stories we tell, we will be talking about the stories. What stories are we talking about? Not these kinds of stories, of course. Some stories are better left forgotten for the most part, and we will be talking instead about the stories that man curates through space. How man can see an empty lot with a certain context, infuse it with meaning and attitudes and bias, develop it further into something that relates to spatial qualities, and find resonance with both structure and enclosure, from the top to the bottom, and create experience. Now, for this part, we'll be talking about basically 3 points. Number 1, what does it mean to design? Number 2, how can you make your thesis or any project design process more meaningful? And number 3, what are some ways to better tell your design story? Number 1, what does it mean to design? It's something we tend to forget, even if we are knee-deep into or neck-deep into architecture already. So we've all been there. We've all been archi-freshies. Maybe some of you are archi-freshies as well. And sometimes you get overwhelmed by architecture. You get overwhelmed in the first few weeks, the first few months, the first semester of school. So much so that you are sort of discouraged, only to be encouraged once more in your dream to be this great architect that somehow sometimes can be very far away, can feel very far away. Because first we've got first year, which has more of the visual technology subjects, rendering and drafting, presentation. You get the second year, and then you start to have math and physics. You start to think about the social aspect of architecture. You go to third year, yung dakilang third year na yan, wherein start to get into construction and think about site planning, structural design, and the like, at least for us in UP. In UP, in fourth year, we thought about more utilities, and we had too many theses. And if you survive all of this, maybe, just maybe, you'll reach your thesis here and culminate everything with a work you can be proud of. All revolving around the notion of what it means to design. But what does it mean to design? So let's do a small exercise now. I'll give you 10 seconds while I drink some water. Given only this prompt, design a box. Think about how you would design a box in your head. Go. Okay? Sige. Here's the thing. For people that are not designers, what tends to happen when you're given this prompt is you'll say, okay, I'll design a box. Sige. I will color the surfaces of the box. There. Sige, kulang pa. I will articulate the surfaces of the box more. There you have it. I have designed the box. This, of course, is not what design is all about. Because design is always built on an intention, first and foremost, and it's not just about aesthetics. So the box isn't in the world for its own sake, and something to think about. For what purpose was this new box exist? The design process is always built on an intention. And so there are many ways you could design a box depending on the intention. So if you design a box again, here are many approaches, depending on how you conceive of the notion of a box. You might design a box that you could keep things in. Another approach would be to design a box that you could play with, composed of many other boxes. Another approach would be to remove the top plane of the box and have something that you can put a person in. You can conceive of a box as a rectangular prism, as something you could lie down on. You could conceive of a box as a module of vertical circulation that you can mix and match throughout a design strategy. You can conceive of a box as a full module for one space that you can stack horizontally or vertically. And from here, you now have this sort of design with structural system, with its own passive cooling solutions and its own furnishings, all from one prompt. Design a box infused with the intentionality that is inherent in the design process. And we tend to forget this at times, but it's the fundamental truth of design. And if you stretch this further and think about designing a house, one way to think about it is that different design sensibilities, good design, is the difference between something like this and something that you're proud of, and something like this, which has the exact same footprint and relatively the same volume, but through different design sensibilities and intuition, it's something that is not something you might be proud of. And so the question now that is very important is, why is it that the one on the right is conventionally seen as better designed than the one on the left? In what ways is the second one better? And to answer this is my own take on this, and one way to think about it is, good design proposals find and utilize differences that make a difference. And one way to sort of visualize this again is the notion of a stair, wherein you design the ground plane in order to accommodate vertical circulation in a way that will help people in a comfortable way. When designing a stair, you have to ask many questions and find many differences that make difference. For instance, is it an interior stair or an exterior stair? This is a very important thing because exterior stairs are going to have different tread to riser dimensions because they are in negative spaces. They're going to have different slip resistance of materials. They're going to have very different cross slope to accommodate drainage from rain and the like. There's also the legal aspect of designing a stair, another difference that makes a difference, because we have to sort of juggle and find the Venn diagram between all the different codes in order to find the constraints for the dimensions upon which we will design the proportion of the tread and riser. There's also the anthropometric dimension that is a difference that makes a difference. And so this thesis of John Oyak shows the ideal riser proportion per his research, for the average Filipino in terms of an interior stair. But there's also the realm of meaning. That's a difference that can make a difference. So if you have a Chinese user, a Chinese client, you cannot make the stair a multiple of 4 because is phonetic for s, which is death in Chinese. And of course, Filipinos don't want oro, plata, mata. So multiple of 3 is not allowed. But what if you have a Chinoy client? Then you have to sort of fusion dance this together, no? And make it not divisible by 3 and by 4. All of this is embedded in the design of the stair, and that is just the ground plane. These differences that make a difference are also intrinsic in even the smallest things, like how you would spec or design a mirror. If you make a mirror too HD, what's going to happen is that your imperfections will come out. Make it a little bit less HD, and you will hide some imperfections. You angle it a little bit more towards you, like they do in shops like H&M, and you will see a better jawline proportion and a more V-tapered body, which is an illusion, of course. And anybody that has ever been to a commercial gym locker room, especially the guys, know that by the location of the two downlights on both sides of your body in front of the mirror will give you the illusion that you've got more definition on your body than will otherwise be a reality. And there are other differences that make a difference that are in the realm of meaning to this larger scale. So one example is this building, the map of Shanghai, and this is how the building and what one of the precursor schemes for this opening at the top to be a circle. Back of Hong Kong, Shanghai, Shanghai. The thing about this is that the reason why this initial scheme, this circle, was disapproved of was that semiotically, the people saw it as a Japanese flag at the height of the Shanghai financial district. So meaning matters. Meaning matters very, very much. Symbology matters, semiotics matter. And other differences that make a difference are a little bit more subliminal. So for instance, if you've ever entered into a supermarket, chances are in one of the entrances, the first thing you'll see are the fruits and vegetables. Do you know why this is? Okay, the reason why is it's a combination of two psychological sensibilities, no? Cognitive priming and moral licensing. What this basically means, very simply, is that when you enter and you say, okay, the fruits are here, I'll get a little bit of fruits. What happens is that, so you get it, you feel good about making the healthy choice, but when you go through your shopping and you go to the junk food, quote unquote, you will feel, okay, I was a good person, I bought some fruits, so it's time to get some of the junk food as a reward. You will tend to buy more junk food, which is more lucrative for the supermarket than otherwise. So companies like Target know this. It's a real psychological fact. You do this, people will spend more on junk food. And don't get me started on casinos. Casinos are probably the best example of how a curated environment can allow you to have your own little world. So much so that you will be lost in this spending of money and this entire process to let the greed flow through you. All of these forces, whether blatant or phenomenal or instinctual, are embedded into the design process. And all of this are things we bring to bear with every line that we draw. And at the end of the day, we have to remember that design is a means for us to improve lives by offering our own unique proposal of a new way of dealing with things. Our own unique proposal. So one thing you have to remember is that perfect designs don't exist. There will always be trade-offs in designs. So I repeat, there's no such thing as there are some exceptions to the rules of perfect design, but they are far and in between now. So perfect designs for the most part don't exist, but that doesn't mean that great, valid, meaningful proposals don't exist. Which brings us to your design, the design you're currently working on, or the design you will hope to work on in the future for your thesis or mini thesis or what have you. Your design proposal is you declaring, this is a valid, meaningful, new way to be with the world. Here is why. And this here is why is the subject of how you present your design. So when you present your design, there are many ways to do this, no? But we'll get to that later. Before the presentation comes the process. And so one thing I'd like to show through this last third of the talk is to, number one, give you tips on how to make the design process more meaningful. Okay. So let's say you're in thesis here, or maybe you have a project. The number one rule, the number one suggestion I would give is to aim for proper process. What do I mean by this? Okay, so I love this this article by Steph Tan Branquinho of Space Fabric. Now, it was in the Architectural Education issue of Blueprint. It is a wonderful article. I suggest you read it. And in it, she basically talks about the state of architectural education, at least around 7, maybe 6 years ago, wherein a lot of students were thinking very much about this interesting bottle because of all the things we see and consume in media for articles and for popular magazines. And you see it through a lot of the architecture that we turn out today, this sensationalism, this focus on the image, and are thrust to be the next Zaha or the next 𝐎𝐧𝐥𝐢𝐬𝐧𝐞. And this can be a danger, because while there is a time and place for acrobatics, sometimes if we fixate on this beautiful bottle of a product, we tend to meander in our design process, not really sure what we want to achieve. A sort of global Doña Victorina effect, when a very clear, powerful, restrained stroke might do the job. Like the powerful clarity of the Osaka Pavilion in 1970 by Leandro V. Locsin, which carried a gravitas to it and an image that was coherent from both the exterior and also the interior, coherent on the outside and inside. And so, students, what we want to sort of be very wary about when we're working on our projects is to deviate away from this whole pre-packaged formula for a beautiful kakaibang design. And this is how this process tends to be, no? First, you have a preconceived building image of what you want your building to look like. I want it to be a Nautilus shell. I want it to be like waves. I want it to be like this and that. So what you do is you have this preconceived notion. You find a site that is a sort of, how do I put this? Where you can put whatever you want on it. So it's an ambiguous site. You do some research, a little bit of research. You force fit the building program to fit this preconceived idea that you have. And voila, you have your design. You have your thesis project. And this, again, this bottle architecture of thinking first of the interesting bottle and force-fitting the program into it is dangerous and something that we can do better in, even though we all fall to it certain parts of a project. No? And there's also this notion of the surface oblique of identity, wherein if you just render the image a certain way, or you apply quote-unquote Filipino materials, then hence it's Filipino. That is also a danger. And it doesn't need to be like this. We can go deeper, and the way to go deeper is to think about the process more than the product at first. So architecture design is a very, very complicated process, and this is what you have to remember if you're doing your project or anything else. No? Like, for example, you have a thesis. Another tip that I'd like to give is remember that it's an architectural thesis, not business or law. So for you 6 years out there, 6 years, I was a 6th year. If you're doing your thesis, one of the things you have to remember is that at the end of the day, the solution you want to give is an architectural one. And with any project that you do, this is a framework I think would be very, very important in order to show you if you're following proper process or not. First, the thing you have to do is conceive of your project in terms of a pyramid with the what, how, and the why as the different layers, the foundation to the actualization. So if this is your thesis or your project, you have to think first about the groundwork, the feasibility, the business aspect, and the legal aspect. So you just have to be sure that's in place. It has a solid foundation. There is the how, which is basically the program and the design framework, the technology you will be using, and the thing you should focus on really highlighting through your design process is the why. That is the positive impact on people. At the end of the day, architecture is about people. And in your design presentation, in your design process, do not lose sight of this higher ideal as you work through these lower layers. And one project I'm going to show you guys that caters specifically to this framework is, let's focus on this first now, to think less about form and more about approach again. So I'll be showing you a project that we do in the firm now, but before that, I'd like to sort of give you a secret sauce of what 𝐎𝐧𝐥𝐢𝐬𝐧𝐞 Partners is about today, in this period of our existence. And this is essentially the core philosophy that Mr. 𝐎𝐧𝐥𝐢𝐬𝐧𝐞 passed down to all of us, that we want to pass down to you guys today, and hopefully you'll take it into account in your design process. This is the LVLP process. Number 1, think deeply about the building program, the conditions, the project's aspirations. From here, we distill what we call the essence, or a big idea. We refine and reinforce this big idea. Our grassroots firm, collect everyone's perspectives and backgrounds in order to shape this in a more coherent way. We use restraint and understatement rather than being very, very obvious. We use abstraction rather than literality. And this is the most important thing. We trust in the public to bring their experience to the design. This is the most important thing. So we are 𝐎𝐧𝐥𝐢𝐬𝐧𝐞 Partners, and the project I'd like to show you guys is, a lot of people know it because it won in the World Architecture Festival in 2017 for 2 categories. No? But for us, this study center and dormitory in Tacloban actually has a more informal beginning, a more sort of sentimental beginning. Basically, what happened is that we were in correspondence with these 2 guys, Diego Bose and Alex Furnes, from a firm called Workshop Architects, that did the study center in Tacloban in 2011. When Yolanda hit in 2013, we basically thought, shucks, I wonder what happened to the study center. So Subar, our project lead at the time, messaged Alex and Jake and said, hey, yeah, we're from Philippines, we're just wondering how the study center did. We thought it was good work. Did it survive Yolanda? And Alex responded, he said, unfortunately, it survived the winds, but the storms which destroyed it. But we're going to Manila in a few weeks. You guys wanna meet up, introduce yourselves, and just cross-pollinate ideas. And so we did. Very informal gathering. Started the night very cordially. Hey, it's nice to meet you. And I'm Sudar. I'm Pierre. I'm great. And at the end of the night, it became, hey, you know what? We're actually doing some work for a great NGO. It's a big study center. We could use some collaborators. Would 𝐿OCSIN be interested in doing this for a good cause? Of course, it's pro bono because it's an NGO. And so what we did, this is how the firm rolls. We passed the sign-up sheet around because that's how we do it. You can join any project you want that is voluntary like this, for as long as you are still able to accommodate your responsibilities. And so we passed the sign-up sheet. The partners, when we floated the idea to them, said 100%, let's do it, no worries. It's the right thing to do. And before I move on, I'll just take a sip of water before we move on to the design process. Okay, so we all know what happened in Tacloban, no? The devastation that happened in 2013 because of Yolanda. And so the project brief was to design an office building, an orphanage building, and the study center building for this community, headed, of course, by the NGO Streetlight, and we worked together with these other great consultants. And the big idea here, and the proper process that I want to forward here, is that we were fixated on the people, not necessarily the building or the technology or the look or the form, but on the meaning and the good that the design could give to these people that had experienced so much trauma because of Yolanda. And so the process we wanted to accommodate is how to turn individuals into community and space into place with meaning as the catalyst. And in order to do this, the framework was basically, as architects, we will not impose, this is the best design for you guys. Rather, we will be in close collaboration with the community through a framework of meaning in terms of space and in terms of their own needs that we will translate into the built form. So more than 100 workshops were done. The local communities were in. They would reflect on what the study center, what the dormitory would be for them, what they really want in space, what their needs are. They stacked the sequence of arrangements of space. They studied it at a macro level, but they also studied it on a micro level. So in this upper right-hand corner, you'll see the sketch exercise that some of the kids did on what window, the notion of a window is for them. So one kid thought of a window as a place where he could look out and look at the stars. Another kid thought it would be a place where he could make Harana the girl he likes. And there are other things that were done, like role playing. In the lower left corner, you see these kids, from what I recall, they are thinking about how it would be like to use the music room when it's built. There were mock-ups that were made. So using popsicle sticks, no less. They studied what it meant to be under a gable. They looked around for things from the environment that they could potentially use, that they liked. And from here, from this grassroots sort of information that we got from them, we translated it into a framework that we thought would be able to accommodate what they were thinking or what they needed. One very important thing to note is that the buildings themselves are actually quite simple. And if you look at some of these earlier iterations now, you'll notice that it's very simple. You've got these solid masses, then you've got these sort of light structural areas in between. And the reason for this is actually very intentional. On one hand, one of the things that people really, really love is the notion of a space where the wind, the breeze can go through, where it's breezy, maliwalas, and at the same time, typhoon winds can go right through. But at the same time, they wanted this notion of a castle, a sturdy concrete structure, because when the dust cleared in Yolanda, one of the only things that the local residents remembered is that they saw this concrete building as one of the only buildings that's standing, and to them it was a castle. And so the meaning of that, but also the function of that, was something that they wanted in the design. So we included it in the framework. So our project lead, Sudar, and some of our other members went on site to take a look at it. We did our own design studies of simple wind analysis, different iterations, and the people themselves designed their fenestrations. So there were many mock-ups, many schemes. The one in the lower left was what eventually won. And one of the things that is also inherent in our process that Archi students tend not to, how do I put this, tend not to focus on is the notion of tectonics being a design driver. What I mean by this, so if you look at the building, the way that the construction joints are made is that they are all bolted. And the reason for this is because it's legible. It can be done by people that are not too skilled in labor. And so the residents themselves feel a sense of ownership on the building. They know how to repair it. It's legible. Some of the tatais were actually the ones that were able to build the thing. And one of the tatais even said, this is the first time that my child has ever said that he is proud of me because I'm doing this work. So there is that aspect to it. And the concrete structures, the castles, they are not just CHD with lintel beams, stiffener columns to look solid. They are really buhos, reinforced concrete. What the idea is what the tectonics of the thing are. And so we're very happy with this project, of course, how it turned out, but it pales in comparison to the good that the local people are now experiencing because of it. And nothing compares to that when you fixate your design process on this end in mind. All right. Make it a habit to always ask, how is my work enriching lives through the design of space in time? This leads us to this last part, which is basically about the design presentation. So let's say you followed the proper process of being fixated on the good that your architectural features will give people. How are ways that you can present your design? How are some ways to better tell your design story? Because one does not simply write a good story, but some of the best stories in this world will stick with you for the rest of your life, and are so powerful and iconic that they can even be culturally appropriated through humorous memes. And so, this is how I believe are some good ways you can distill this process and present it clearly. Number one, design which parts of the design problem are most important and focus your presentation on your response to them. Okay, so architecture is very complex. We think about many different things. But in forming your cohesive whole, you cannot explain away everything. Your thesis or your project will be very complicated. It will be a nosebleed to look at. And so you have to focus only on what is essential to your design response. So let's say you're designing a chapel and you want it to create a democratic space and land lightly on the earth. So you've got two parts that you can focus on: democratic space and land lightly on the earth. So when you present it, and this of course is the precursor scheme to the first built work of the 𝐎𝐲𝐿𝐼, Parish of the Holy Sacrifice in 𝐻𝐵. And if you were to present this with these ideas in mind, for the democratic space, you would talk about the equidistance through the nature of this circular geometry. And through the touching lightly the earth, you could talk about the thin shell concrete structure and how it lands very lightly in terms of the connection visually. So that is what you would focus on through that prompt. Another example, let's say you're designing a learning hall and you want to focus on sustainable technology and social gathering. So when you present your design, what you can do is, as you're presenting it, like the Henry C. building in LaSalle was, you could be sure to talk about the big idea, bringing to bear both of these things, habitable and tree, the sustainability and the social space. Package your big idea like that. But make the payoff being really able to explain on a technical basis how it's sustainable, what are the technologies that, or at least the attempt of the technologies in order to meet this big idea, and talk about the social aspect, how creating the space at the ground floor is able to accommodate a wide variety of social needs. So again, focus very simply on one or two points that you want to highlight. One more example. Let's say, let's make it very large, something very complicated. What if you design an ecotourism center that focuses on landscape engineering and different layers of immersion? Those are the two key highlight features. So when you present your design, you can present it clearly. So in terms of the landscape engineering, let's say for this this center we did for Blueprints Design Better, the first part can be easily or more effectively communicated by number one, first you talk about the site, then you talk about the strengths of the site in terms of the natural resource, then you talk about the problems of the site in terms of environmental degradation. So site overview, strengths, weaknesses, and then the response. And for the response, for the landscape engineering, you can use clear different kinds of mappings to show, based on the same base image, how the different design strategies work in terms of the zoning, circulation, water management, and experience zones. And then for the second part, then you can really go into the details of how people will use the different nodes. So the different layers of immersion through perspectives. So diagrams for the first part, perspectives for the second part. It's one strategy that you can use for more complex projects. And the next thing is think about your core message or big idea and make sure it is consistent all throughout your design output. So this core message or big idea, that's the next step. And one building that shows this very clearly is, of course, the CCP, the main theater, and the big idea behind this and the precursor scheme was trying to find a universal image that many people could resonate with, many Filipinos could resonate with. And Mr. Locsin at the time talked about this notion of an abstracted rock on the shore with a way sort of eroding the underside. That was the big idea that he abstracted. It's something that many Filipinos could resonate with. And this is what the big idea was refined from. So you see some of the sketches on how it was. And you can see how the big idea is apparent on the exterior in terms of the structure integrated with the building, but also on the interior with the sensibility of having sort of the waves molding the underside of the different elements, the different soffits, stairs, these rock masses sprouting from the ground, all curated and crafted by the same hand, the same sensibility, and the same big idea, reaching even the theater itself. Okay, tip number 3, explain in a logical way how you developed your core idea. So you've established your big idea, how can you best explain it in a logical way? So one way to demonstrate this is another project by LVLP. And you guys might know this, it is essentially the Ayala Museum. And if you pass it by Makati, the new Ayala Museum, this is the big idea behind the Ayala Museum and the process behind it. So the site of the Ayala Museum, on one hand, had this sacred or beautiful park on the inside, but it also was connected to the very profane, bustling, and busy city. So the sacred and the profane was the big idea for the museum. So on the site, it was this bridge between the sacred and the profane. So you've got the tree and the urban exterior, but the very nature of the museum was also dialectic between the sacred and the profane. Because on one hand, it was a repository of sacred objects, but on the other hand, it had the disseminating public face that had to engage with the very profane city. And the question then was how to bring these two aspects to bear in how the building itself would be crafted and designed. And this is very rudimentary, a very sort of rough way on how it was done. Number 1, establish where the sacred zone and the profane zone are. Sacred meaning Greenbelt Park, profane meaning the city and the roadside. Create a mediating public space on the ground floor, the ground plane that bridges the two things. Use the angle of the road on this side and use it on this mass in plan, and use that same angle on the other mass in elevation. Make this mass solid because it is the repository of sacred objects. Make this mass transparent because it is the disseminating public face to the profane city. And in the middle, create a convening or mediating structure that is both formally, semiotically, and functionally coherent as a mediating structure, because that is where you will put the stairs. And so that was the big idea and clear design process between how the form was generated for the Ayala Museum, some of the initial sketches before there was some iteration. This is how it was from 2005, I believe, until 2020, and there's a new iteration you will see very soon. Tip number 4, the second to the last tip, highlight striking and unique features your approach chooses to adopt. Okay, so you got the big idea? Okay, tip number 1, focus on proper process. Tip number 2, establish your big idea. Tip number 3, very logically work through your big idea as you work through your form. Number 4, highlight striking and unique features when you present your design. So one example I'll give is actually in Punong Gary's place in Silay. There are a number of experiences that Sir Ed Ledesma, our managing partner, put there, and I'll share them to you as I tell stories about space. So this is a party of what I sketched from what I remembered in terms of the experiences of the different buildings in that place. No? So imagine you are walking through Punong Gary's place, which is somewhat like a resort. You could best say it like that. And you see this bare concrete structure, which is overgrown with plants and it's hidden by bamboo and the like. So you notice that if you go further, you're like, okay, this is a very brutalist building. On the right, you'll see a stairs going up. You go up the stairs, and you're greeted by this sliding door. You think, okay, enter the sliding door, and on the inside, when you enter, as a counterpoint to the quote-unquote brutalist exterior, you've got this beautiful white space with a skylight on top that hardly ever gets direct sunlight because it is covered by trees. So that's a unique and striking feature that you can walk your panel through. Another way is to inject humor. So here's another experience in Punong Guy's place that I'll tell a story about. So imagine you see this pavilion in one of the fish ponds, and the stairs going down. So you think, okay, I'll go to that pavilion. You walk down the stairs, and as you walk towards the pavilion, you notice, oh, there's another person coming towards you, maybe from the other side. But then as you walk closer, you realize it's not another person. What the architect did is they put a mirror facing this path. So it looks like you are walking towards yourself as an optical illusion. And so as you get closer, you notice, darn, it's me, it's you. What an interesting experience. And so you are in this beautiful space that you can lie down on a hammock in, surrounded by nature. And what is behind the mirror? Very interestingly, an open toilet. So using humor, Sir Ed loves to do that. He has many very memorable buildings in this place. And the last one, using counterpoints, humor, and sequence to create a curated experience. Okay, so imagine you're walking surrounded by fish ponds, you're walking on elevated mounds in this beautiful nature enclave, and you see something on the right. It is this very interesting mound now. And you decide, okay, I want to go to this mound on the left. So what happens is, you see that there is a bridge connecting to the mound. So you have to carefully walk over the bridge, then duck your head under the tree, and you see a sign for something called Neng's Island. Interesting. You duck under, you stand up, and you notice, oh my God, in the middle of nowhere, there's this beautiful lapping pool. And so you've got the bridge over troubled water as the first part of the experience. You've got the lapping pool on the second part of the experience. But it's not yet over. Now you have a third part that Sir Ed sneaks into there. If you look very closely at the lapping pool and you walk further, you'll notice that there's still something more to this. So you walk, you go under some trees again, and you see under this beautiful big untouched tree is this beautiful hidden enclave that you can rest in, find repose in, with that same skylight that doesn't get sun. And you'll notice from the corner of your eye another path that will lead you to your next adventure. Sequence matters, and it's something you can bring to bear throughout your design process. And for the last tip, as I close up my presentation, to bring joy in architecture, it involves this last thing. Narrate your design by the valuable experiences it will make for people and the lives it will enrich. So this, I'll close the presentation on a very personal note. So this was me back in the day for my thesis. And the thing about my thesis is that it was about an archetype for an educational and reintegration center for Philippine domestic workers. And I picked the topic because of a very special reason, which I delve into in my TikToks. But essentially, when I was doing my presentation back in the day, I really focused on the needs of the people that I was designing for, and using design concepts that would sort of be a psychological response to these needs. And so I did the same thing as you guys did now. I went through the proximity matrices, the bubble diagrams, the sequential design process of going through my form, the different design strategies and performance indicators and key performance indicators that I had to meet. Then I thought logically about how the design would progress until reaching the final iteration. And so this was my STP of my thesis. I'm very proud of this work. Even if it is imperfect, it will always be imperfect, but it can still be something that we look back to with fondness and joy. So thinking about how the building would work through a variety of different aspects, no? Even utilities. And so this was my thesis. And I'm very happy that, in my view, I followed proper process in the design and the production of this thing. And when I presented my thesis, I really focused on the different spaces, the different psychological qualities of the spaces, the different uses, and how it would cater to the user base in helping them move forward in life. And I got featured before. And as a closing note, the one thing my thesis was about, the main reason, the main why that I sneakily put into one final gesture in my thesis is this. In the main axis of the building, of the site organization, you'll notice this column in the middle, along the edge of the axis that is color white. It's different from the color of the other columns. If you go nearer, you'll see something interesting. Okay, I'll go nearer. There's something at the bottom of that column. Go nearer. You see a picture of our late Gaia of 27 years, who died of ovarian cancer that year. So the thesis I did was dedicated to her, and it made all the difference. Because at the end of the day, design is and always will be about people. And we all have the people that we love, our families. We all have the people that we lead, the people we reach out to, even when we don't have to. The movements that we join, even when they go against the grain. The million dreams that keep us awake. The million dreams that we share with our teams. The million dreams that we ride to oblivion towards because we love them and we believe in them so much. And we share this world with many different professions. And the one thing you should remember through all our different stories is that when it comes to sharing stories, we're all in this together. Thank you. Okay.
Ayan. Thank you so much, Architect Aldo, for that practical lecture about design philosophies. It is really essential for us, architecture students, to be familiar with design philosophies and apply it in our outputs. For me naman po, yung natutunan ko po dun sa talk niya is complex philosophies are really connected to architecture and actually everything. So, yung evolution natin as society, parang siya po yung nagmo-mold ng mismong architecture style and sa architectural field po natin. Ate Angeline,
Ayan, naka-mute pala ako. Yes, I agree with you, partner. Yes. For me naman po, architect, as I listen to your talk po, parang mas na-realize ko po na yung sa simula po ng mga shinare nyo po na mga stories, indeed, everyone has something to instill, diba, to impart to someone depending on their background. So, as I listen po, I realized that I should strive harder, I should strive more, and aspire to be a better student and professional, of course, in the future. Ayan, and yung mga history po na na-share nyo, indeed na parang every second talaga may nangyayari. Kumbaga, every action in every second really matters. And sa design process naman po, mas na-enlighten po ako kasi yung sinabi po ninyo na think less about form and more about approach. Medyo na ano po ako dun. Kasi as an architect student, mas conscious po ako sa form ng mga dinedesign ko. Mas nagpo-focus and less consideration ako sa approach, which is hindi pala dapat. We should think more about approach kasi dun na magpo-follow lahat. Kumbaga, the form, the solution, and everything. Yes, and yung mga shinare nyo po na mga projects ninyo in the past, ayun, sobrang nakakaaliw po na malaman na yun po yung mga naging products ninyo. Kasi mas nakita po namin yung purpose talaga ng mga design nyo. Because design is really for people. Design is there to solve certain problems. Ayun po, architect. Yes, ayan. And ayan, may nakikita po tayo ngayon sa nating live comments po natin. Ayan, meron po dito si si Mr. Seth Angelo Tan. Yan, excited daw po siya sa maging lecture niya today kasi pina-follow niya po yata kayo sa TikTok Architect. Ayun.
Yeah. At
Yes,
Architect
ayan.
follow if you guys wanna follow.
Yes. Ayan. So, eto naman po, Architect, na it's time for us to entertain the questions of our live viewers. We have here po user John Doe. Yan. How can we integrate a project design without disrupting the environment that surrounds the site?
Yeah. So it's a very interesting thing, no? The one thing that you should sort of take into consideration is to touch the ground lightly. That is the first thing that that I believe you should think about in your site planning. Every building that you put stems from the ground, and depending on where it's put, it will hit trees. You'll need to cut and fill them out, and your building placement and your building design should take that sensibility as a very prime directive. As a big example, no, Sir Ed Ledesma, the guy that designed Punong Place, you'll notice that he loves his trees. And he had an experience back when he was younger wherein he cut a lot of trees in order to do something, in order to make a certain fish pond. And he was horrified by the result. And so since then, he maintained to never cut a single tree for his design. And you'll see some of the buildings there, they work around the existing nature. So what you'll have to do talaga, and it's different for every site, think about how the ground plane touches the ground, how you would construct that, and how you would integrate and use trees not as a parang sagabal or hindrance that you have to parang accommodate, but use as a design resource and work with. So another example, I think, is the kindergarten by Tezuka Architects. You can search that. You'll see what they did with the tree. It's very beautiful. So yeah, essentially those are the two principles. Thank you for the question.
Yes, I agree. Because as an architect, responsibility rin talaga natin yung environment, diba? Taking care of our environment. Ayan, Mr. John Doe, we hope na nasagot po ang inyong question. Thank you for that, architect. I guess we have another one pa po. Here is a question from Miss Rayan Ramos. Architect Aldo, what is your inspiration naman when it comes to designing?
Yeah. I think baka medyo apparent, no? I am a bit unconventional in terms of my design inspirations because I don't really think very much about just architecture. I'm big into history, I'm big into psychology, I'm big into a lot of these deeper themes of philosophy that actually are very cogent in design. So when there are key ideas that you can find a relationship between the built form and this sort of metaphysical thing, it's very, very powerful. I'm inspired by my mentors from the firm. I'm inspired by many, many things, but I think the main principle is that a lot of the things that drive my design process, which is very human-centered, is a very wide horizon of things that I read and watch and consume. And if you want to sort of find your niche or find yourself in this design world, even if I'm very young, I do believe this, you have to read beyond what most people are reading. And I think that is the challenge that we all have in this day and age.
Yes, all right. Thank you po for that, architect. Ayan, siguro si Miss Rian, kayo naman po ang magiging kanyang inspiration when it comes to designing. Thank you, Miss Rian, for that question. And I guess, ayan po muna sa ating live viewers. Ito naman po, architect, from our questions from the registrants. Ayan. A question from our registration form. How does Philippine architecture or architecture in general improve its movement, style, or trend over the years naman? Since kanina is napag-usapan nga natin po yung mga history ng ating world. Ano po sa tingin niyo, architect?
Yeah, so I think the main principle is that design is always a response to specific context. No, modernity was a response to the wars that happened. Post-modernity was a response to modernity. Meta-modernity today's response to postmodernism. So in order for the design wall to move forward, I think the most apt way that it can do this, whether it's Philippine architecture or architecture in general, is to think very deeply about the context and the problems that face and plague architecture today, and how we are able to accommodate it with design solutions, technological solutions. So we are rife with a lot of key design issues in our present time. The environmental crisis is one. Proper urban planning is another. This whole COVID situation has shown us that well buildings and buildings that are not sick are not just supposed to be things that you don't prioritize. You have to put human needs, human health as a forefront in building design from here forward, both in terms of an ethical standpoint, also in terms of a public health standpoint. So my own personal take, my own opinion is that sustainability and well-building, the opposite of sick building, should be a given in all the buildings that we do. So yeah, my 2 cents.
Okay, thank you po for that, Architect. Ayan, we have po, last one na po ata. Tama ba? Tech team? Ayan, we have a last one question po from our registrants again. Philippine architecture is always tied with Philippinism. As an architect, how can we translate this into a style that will fit into a generation?
Yeah, I think so. There are the one thing you have to understand, my view, is that when it comes to anything that concerns national identity, there are many sort of camps, no, that can assign a certain level of credence of what Filipino architecture is. So there's vernacular regionalism, which, for one, is draws from historical context. There's also the approach of people like Mr. Locsin that, given the context of where we are, he seeks to infuse Filipino sensibilities and abstract Filipino spatial patterns and meanings into a very modern architecture. So I think that in terms of Philippine architecture, it is less about style and more about substance. There are certain intrinsic sensibilities of Filipinos that are more important than just the surface applique of materials. For instance, a Filipino airport is very different from a Western airport in fundamental things like gathering areas and parking. Because in Western airports, some cultures are very park and ride. They bring a car, they park there, they go to the airport, they come back. We don't do that. We bring the entire barrio, we make salubong and the like. And so the proportion of parking areas to communal spaces in Filipino airports is going to be very different from Western airports. Same thing in terms of the spaces in your house. We are very much about inter-family interaction to a very large part. So think less in terms of the visual look. Think more in terms of how the building performs and accommodates social patterns that iterate over time, that happen very, very often. So again, that is my stance. The surface image can only take us so far if we want to sort of untangle what Filipino architecture is today.
Yes, okay. Thank you po, Architect. We believe naman po na meron talagang sariling identity ang Philippine architecture, and we hope na kaming mga Archi students din and future professionals is makakontribute to that. And
That's
I
our
guess,
challenge.
Architect, yes po.
Yeah, go lang. Kasi that's our
Yes po.
challenge.
Yes. Yes, ito po, Architect, siguro last na question naman na po ito from me naman po. Ayan, as an Archi student po, Architect, how can we narrow down our design ideas and concept along our design process? Kasi usually may mga klase po ng student na along the design process, nagbabago yung core ideas nila. Ito na pala yung gusto ko, tapos biglang ito na pala. How can we solve that kind of situation, Architect?
Yeah. So this is the very Locsin take, no, again. It is that at the end of the day, you want to be able to express what your big idea is. And if you can trace how even the smallest of things can relate to your big idea, then you know that it's coherent. And the thing about design is that if you think you're overcomplicating it, the best way to notice it is if you have so many elements and so many kinds of details and so many spatial qualities that do not necessarily relate to each other that are popping up because this might be cool here, this might be cool here. But if you look at the bigger picture, this is relate. If your building is very very informal and you have very formal details in certain parts, is that your invention, or is it an outlier because you want to draw from something you've seen on the internet and put it into your building? So the best way I can think of saying it is that if you conceive of the different elements of your building from the micro to the macro, of point, line, plane, volume, and termination, you will look at your building through all those aspects and they relate to each other, then you know that it's coherent.
Alright, sige, noted po on that, architect. Actually, ngayon meron kaming design project and I will make sure to apply yung mga natutunan ko po sa inyo. Retail shop po actually yung magiging project namin. Ayan. Shout out sa mga ka-blockmates ko. Ayan. Thank you po. Thank you so much po, architect. Ayan. I think we've covered and answered all of our live viewers' questions na po. Ayan. So once again, thank you very much for lending us your time and effort, Architect Aldo Mayoralgo, and for sharing with us your kind words of wisdom that would certainly help us in design. At this point, we would like to give you the Certificate of Appreciation for being with us virtually today. Ayan, Architect, since hindi tayo pwedeng mag-face-to-face na seminar, virtual na lang po muna, Architect. This Certificate of Appreciation is hereby presented to Architect Alexander Mayoralgo for imparting their knowledge and insights as a guest speaker of the 5th episode of Arquitecturo, an online lecture series held this 23rd day of May 2021 as a part of the Project TAP via YouTube live stream. Together, let's take a step forward. Signed by yours truly, Daniel Angeli G. Pastrano, Arquitecturo Head and 𝐀𝐫𝐤𝐢𝐭 Vice President, 𝐎𝐧𝐥𝐢𝐧𝐞 Joshua A. Punsalan, Project TAP Head and 𝐀𝐫𝐤 Auditor, and Ms. Tricia Danica L. Belizar, 𝐀𝐫𝐤 President. Once again, thank you po, Architect.
Thank you so much, guys. Good something. Salamat.
Yan, partner, nakamute ka.
I'm sorry, I'm back. Ayan. Once again, thank you po, Architect Aldo. May we know po you where we can reach you in social
Ayan,
media.
nawala si Architect. Pero Architect,
Pwede po ba
nandiyan pa po
iba?
ba kayo?
Hello,
Yes.
Hello. Sige, if you want to reach me on social media, just follow me on TikTok at Architect Aldo, or Facebook Architecture with Aldo. So I just have a small educational TikTok that I post videos on from time to time, sharing things that I wish I learned in architecture school. And that's just why I do it. I hope you guys are able to gather cool stuff from it. Feel free to ask me questions at Architect Aldo. Thank you.
Thank you po, Architect. Noted
thank you
po on
po.
that. See you po in the
Thank you
future,
po.
Architect.
See you.
Thank you
Salamat, guys.
po. Ayun. All right, that was a very insightful talk. So talaga nga namang ma-apply natin ng different philosophies na naituro sa atin ni AR Aldo sa mga future works and projects natin. Once again, don't forget to like our official Facebook page, PLM 𝐾𝐲 Student Council. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram. It's at 𝐾𝐲 Official, and support our One View, One Step Forward campaign by subscribing and watching our videos. It's PLM Architecture in YouTube. All right, for now, we will be having a short break and we will be right back. So stay tuned for the second part of our webinar, guys. See you.
See you.
What's up, Ketchup? Oops. No. What's up, Arkistas, and welcome to episode 1 of PLM Architecture Season 4. We've been going through tough times for 7 long months months na, kasi 7 long months na tayong nasa bahay lang because we have to stay for our own safety. But that shouldn't stop us from learning and discovering new things that would specifically improve our skills as an RT student. Bring out your gadgets, Arkistas, because I am going to share student-friendly, beginner-friendly softwares that would help us improve in our online class, in our digital plates, and kung saan nyo pa man gagamitin itong mga softwares na to. Let's get started. First on our list is AutoCAD. AutoCAD was used as early as 1982. So isa siya sa pilot software na ginamit para sa architectural plans. It's a 2D drafting program that ensures accuracy in drawing plans. It manages small to large projects with exact measures and detail. It can be used for 3D modeling, kaso ang downside ay mabigat ito sa CPU and sa RAM ng ating units. So kapag gagamitin ito, better make sure na capable yung unit nyo, yung specs niya, para magamit ang AutoCAD. That's why AutoCAD revolutionized the architectural drafting process and the planning process. SketchUp is number 2 on our list. So when it comes to 3D modeling naman, SketchUp ay isa sa pinaka very beginner-friendly na software kasi nung una ko siyang ginamit para lang ako naglalaro sa Paint. At sobrang easy i-navigate yung interface niya. All the tools will be laid out there. So para ka lang maglalaro ng Sims, pero mas simple siya and mas modified. You can produce simple design concepts and also up to complex concepts that would give details sa inyong models and would also give a good visual for presentation. Pwede ka rin mag-add ng plugin sa SketchUp that would level up your skill or that would make your software customized ayon sa gusto nyong magamit dito. Third on our list is V-Ray. V-Ray is also a rendering program where you can make realistic drawings and realistic models that you could show off to your clients, to your audience, to your prof. In our situation, since students tayo, mostly recommended to for interior designs and interior architecture. Kaso, hindi siya independent na software. It's also a plugin for ArchiCAD and SketchUp. Fourth naman, we have Lumion. Mabilis and high quality ang rendering ng videos at still images when it comes to Lumion. You can import several 3D models na nagawa niyo from SketchUp or other softwares and then ilalagay niyo to Lumion so that you can add more details, spice it up, and ang maganda dito sa Lumion, nakikita mo kung anong itsura ng design mo based sa araw. So, if it's 3 p.m., ganito yung itsura at tama ng araw sa design mo. If it's 9 p.m., ganito naman siya kapag gabi. Using this software, napakalaking panahon na yung matitipid mo dahil yung rendering na dating couple of days, it will only take a few hours. So, sobrang helpful nito lalo na sa ating students na sobrang time is gold ang motto natin. So, you might want to check out Lumion. Fifth and final software on our list, and alam na alam nyo na rin to, and halos lahat ng tao ay marunong gumamit nito, this is Adobe Photoshop. This is a graphic software by Adobe na pwede mong gawin yung post-processing ng 3D models mo. So, kung may konting iti-tweak ka pang details or color grading, dagdag entourage, pwedeng gawin dito sa Photoshop. Also, you can make your architectural boards, thesis boards, and portfolio dito sa Photoshop. You can save it into GIF, JPEG, PNG. It's very convenient kasi nandito na halos lahat ng kailangan mo. You can add text to your project. You can make diagrams, elevations, sections, isometric drawings. Very capable si Photoshop na gawin yung mga yan. So these are few of the hundreds and thousands of applications na pwede nating magamit as RT students. And don't forget to explore habang kaya pa natin i-explore dahil mostly online class nga. So we're transitioning into a digital, more virtual setup. For more informations with other softwares, check nyo yung description box dahil nandun yung ibang links and ibang details na ilalagay natin dahil kulang na kulang ang isang video para i-enumerate lahat ng helpful na softwares for us. So feel free to check the details. And also, I encourage you to subscribe. Kung di pa kayo nakasubscribe, click the bell button to be notified for the next episode of Arkiventures. And don't forget to like this video if you liked it. I hope you're safe and sound at your home right now. And sana okay pa kayo sa online class. Thank you so much and see you on our next episode. Bye!
What's up, Arkistas? It's your host, Rika, and welcome to Archiventures Episode 2, Season 4. For this video, you've seen the title, you've seen the thumbnail, of course, so we will be giving you tips on how to survive online school as an architecture student. But wait, hold up. If you're not an architecture student and you just happen to stumble across this video, don't click out yet. Because for sure may makuha ka pa rin tips dito sa video na to on surviving your online class. For our tips, it is divided into three categories. The first category are tips for your online classes. Second are while making your plates. And the third category being the other tips that can help you survive the whole setup in general. Now for our first category and first tip.
Whoa! First archetype for online class is to make sure to check your devices before the class starts. Make a camera test or run a sound test to ensure that your camera, your microphone, or your headphone are working.
The second tip is to always have a pen and a notebook with you when you're in class, just to help you write down notes, write down specific details about the plate, or just to help you review for your exams.
Tip number 3. Provide yourself with a glass of water right beside you. Or if you have some, go with a snack. Or if you're really scared of getting your plates wet, you could always go with a water bottle. Remember to keep yourself hydrated and quench your hunger during these online classes. Now on to the next tip.
Tip number 4, keep yourself from getting distracted sa online class. Alam ko nakadepende to sa environment sa bahay kasi hindi naman lahat may proper space for online learning. Hindi lahat may space na out lang distractions tapos di ka kaingay. So I think it would be better kung i-inform yung mga kasama niyo sa bahay about sa class schedule niyo, ganun, para aware sila na may klase ka, ganun. At the same time, matulungan ka nila just in case na maingay kapitbahay niyo, ganun, masabihan nila. And iwasan niyo muna yung sa social media habang nag-online class. This is na. I know, it's new for us. Tapos, sobrang daming adjustments, pero alam ko kaya natin yan, kakayanin. Yun lang. Sana makatulong sa online class. Good luck.
Tip number 5. Always check on your Microsoft Teams account. Ang MS Teams ang major na platform na ginagamit ng CAOB or ng PLM when it comes to blended learning. Dito nagaganap ang ating online classes and dito rin na-upload ang ating modules, lectures, and assignments. Dito rin natin mas mabilis na na-reach out ang mga professors bukod pa sa Facebook and Messenger. That is why it is really important to regularly check on your account para maging updated sa mga announcement ng profs or di naman kaya sa modifications kapag may assignment. So yeah, always remember to maximize the use of MS Teams depending on your needs.
Now for our second category, while making your plates.
So here's a big brain tip. Make a list of your plates and their corresponding deadlines. What I mean by deadline is your own deadline. You should not make a deadline later than the actual submission is, but actually a little bit earlier than the actual deadline, so you can avoid cramming and you have ample time before actually submitting your plates. Kasi kadalasan kapag magpapasa ka na, tsaka pa nagkakaroon ng mga problema. And also remember that your professors doesn't usually accept late submissions. So if you program your mind earlier than their deadline, then there won't be any problem. Also remember that finishing first doesn't always equate to finishing best. Just take your time in doing your plates and just do the best that you can, and it all will be better.
Hello, Arkistas! So my advice for you today is that gawin muna natin yung mga task, homework, or plates na mas madali before natin gawin yung mga plates na mas mahirap and complex. Para in that way, mas madali nating matatapos ang mga easy homeworks. Then after that, wala ka na isipin na other stuff while doing the more challenging plates. para 'di ba hindi mo na sila iisipin, makapag-focus tayo at makapagbigay tayo ng maraming time sa mga plate natin na mas mahirap at complex. And always keep in mind na tapusin natin and finish one or two plates or tasks per day as much as possible hanggat kaya natin para hindi tayo nagka-cram and pagsabay-sabay yung mga gagawin natin pag nasa deadline.
Make sure that your workplace is organized and clean before and after doing your plates. Trust me, Arkista, an organized workspace is a plus 10 sa paggawa ng inyong mga plates. Also, make sure na magdagdag ng extra table katabi ng inyong drafting table para dun nyo ilalagay ang mga drafting materials. And if you're like me, na drafting board ang ginagamit, make sure na yung table na bibilhin nyo ay mayroong pull-out drawer para dun nyo na lang ilalagay yung mga drafting materials, bagsak na lang ng bagsak, at hindi ka aligaga habang gumagawa ng inyong plates.
If you don't have the motivation to start making your plates, then make the title block first because making that is very time consuming. Once you have the motivation to start your plates, then you can have faster progress with it.
When rendering, it is very much advisable to practice to avoid mistakes. Also, you could use samples or swatches so that you could see if your textures, shadows, or colors work together.
And the last category for our tips. Other tips that can help you survive the whole thing in general.
Always make sure that you guys have the necessary materials for accomplishing your plate. For example, your rendering materials and mediums that are good for 1 or 2 months. Short, long, and A4 papers are the most commonly used for research works, so you better make sure that you guys have plenty. My tip here is that since we always use short papers, I stock a rim since it's cheaper that way and it can last me for more than a semester.
Check if there are PDF files of the books that you need to save money. Mag-try kayo mag-search sa net or mag-ask kayo sa inyong mga ate at kuya, and you can save it in your phone or in your tablet or in your laptop, or you can print it para mas makatipid pa kayo.
Our next tip is from a podcast, and it says that it's okay to lower the bar sometimes because tayo mga architecture students who always want to raise the bar. We want better grades and better looking plates. And it's actually a nice trait to have to always strive for excellence. But sometimes it leads to normalizing the hustle culture, which is very bad for our body and also for our mental health. And sabi nga, kung pagod ka na, pwede kang magpahinga, pero bawal kang sumuko. So, if we need a break, just take it. If we also want a reward and we think we deserve it, go for it. And also, we have to gravitate towards what replenishes our energy. Sabi nga, kailangan natin makinig sa ating mga katawan. At saka, sabi rin din sa podcast na yun, is we have to empathize with ourselves like how we empathize with others. So, ang tip natin is it's okay to lower the bar sometimes.
Wag. Basta wag. Wag mahihiyang magtanong kung may right ba ito. Don't be afraid to ask questions sa mga professors o sa mga kaklase mo kung meron kang hindi maintindihan. Kasi kayo na lang magkakaklase ang magtutulungan. At sinong prof ang gusto na walang maintindihan ng tinuturuan niya. Kaya huwag kang matakot.
Watch architecture-related webinars. Well, the most obvious reason to consider attending webinars may be to have certificates for job applications, or maybe for self-improvement on a certain skill or program related to architecture, like AutoCAD, Lumion, and Photoshop, and other paid license programs. But I guess you already know that. A very important feature of webinars is to learn things that are rarely taught in school. Our professors can only teach us so much, and giving us learning materials is not really a complete answer to that limitation. And it's not their fault at all. By attending webinars, We can learn new things about our field in so many different perspectives. Our general bubble may be biased in the view of being in the city, being a Filipino in general, or maybe being on a certain religion, or maybe on their own personal experiences, like those architects who wouldn't let go of the traditional ways that are obviously obsolete. Let it go, architect. Now, that is not a completely bad, but learning from others with so much different encounters to the profession can help us in understanding things in a new light. And no, that doesn't mean that everything Western is applicable to our setting, okay? But really, for me, I'd say architecture students of today and architects of the future need not only to immerse themselves in architectural online seminars, but also in other fields where architecture can be connected to. Remember, architecture is a field in itself, but architecture is a field that spans almost in every other craft in the world. By doing that, we not only become aware of others' ideal or erroneous state of being, but it also helps us become more compassionate, more humane for others. And that is exactly what architects need to be, now and more than ever.
And that is it for our video. I hope you guys enjoyed it and sana may natutunan kayo sa mga tips na binigay namin sa inyo. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe and click on the bell button to get notified every time we upload a new video. Good luck and happy plates, Arkistas. Stay safe. Ciao!
Ayan. Hello, guys. See you ulit. So, before we proceed sa webinar proper natin is mag-hello muna tayo sa mga live viewers dyan sa comment section. Ayan. Hello kay Valina Robbie C. Pa-shoutout daw po. Rushing plates while watching. Haha. From ano pala siya? Nueva Ecija University of Science and
Hello!
Technology.
Hello,
Layo pala ng
Robbie!
natin. Ang layo ng reach.
Yes! Good luck sa
Ano,
plates!
true. Pa-shoutout rin po kay Architect Carl Jonel Alipane. Ayun, shoutout daw po. Ayan, hello po, Architect. And meron din po tayong mga dito, taga-ibang college. Hindi ko po ma-pronounce yung name mo, sorry po, pero in Thai yung name niya. Good afternoon daw. From Asia Source iCollege daw po siya. Hello!
Hello! Asia Source iCollege.
Ayan. Tapos, pa-shoutout din po si Miss Isa Anot. Hi!
Hello!
Hi, Miss Isa. Ayun. Ikaw po, Ate Angeli, may masasabi ka po ba sa mga live viewers natin?
Yes, hello din. May mga nag-comment na nasa 7 years na ata sila sa architecture. Ayan. Hello po kay Miss Charina Azor. Hello. Ayan, i-show natin ang kanyang comment. Kaway-kaway daw, mga 7 years ako. Good luck po and laban lang. Kaya po natin to and makikita po namin kayo gumraduate sa architecture. Ayan. Hello din. Ayan, may kumaway nga. Ito, si Miss Mary Rose Ann Estrella. Hello sa inyo. Ayan, kung saan man po kayong university galing, hello po sa inyo. And thank you very much for watching Architecturo here in PLM Architecture YouTube channel.
Ayan, so let's continue with this webinar. Again, don't forget to like our official Facebook page, PLM 𝐾𝐲 Student Council, and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at 𝐾𝐲 SE Official. And of course, support our One View, One Step Forward campaign by subscribing and watching our videos. It's PLM Architecture on YouTube. Ngayon, we know that you're still pumped for today's webinar, so let's continue right away.
That is right. Thank you, partner. Also, we would like to thank our generous sponsor and partner for the 5th episode of Architecturo. Once again, huge thanks to Itones Ph and PLM College of Education Student Council for being with us in this month's episode. Okay, so let's get right on to our second talk. Ayan, kung ready na kayo guys, so here it is. It is an honor to introduce to you our second guest speaker. He is a graduate of the University of Santo Tomas College of Architecture and Fine Arts in 1979 and a registered architect since 1981. He was involved in various private practices, and in 1986, he established an architectural firm called Asian Architects. As of today, he is the managing partner of Asian Architects, a member of the College of Fellows of the United Architects of the Philippines, and one of the first 12 architects of APEC Architects in the Philippines. He has been bestowed the title of ASEAN Architect with the first specialization of green architecture. He is also the founding member of Green Architecture Advocacy Philippines, or Green AP, a civic organization that promotes green architecture and sustainability to all sectors of society. The long list of his achievements goes on, but above everything else, he is a mentor who generously shares his knowledge and experience with others with the hope of making the world a better place. Here with us today to talk about Overtures, the future of Philippine architecture, let us all welcome Architect Miguel Guerrero. Good
Thank you,
afternoon
thank
po,
you.
Architect.
Good
Hi
afternoon,
po.
Anjali. Good afternoon, Holly. Good afternoon to my co-speaker, Architect Aldo. No? Anyway, PLM is actually very close to my heart. You know why?
Yes, why po?
Bakit po?
It is where the first WAPSA National Board was elected. So actually, PLM is actually part of the national history of WAPSA. No? I was the advisor to WAPS, the first national board, second national board, and third national board of WAPSA. No? So the first president of WAPSA was Christine Calixto from USC at that time. No? So dapat hanapin niyo yung kwartong yan. Dapat may plaque yan na this is where WAPSA National started. Bago
Wow, that
mamatay yung mga architects na involved dyan dahil baka hindi na mahanap yung kwartong yan. No? Anyway, so thank you very much for having me on this Sunday. You should be chilling on a Sunday, but for some strange reason, you're all attentive, no? And as I was listening to Architect Aldo, he's very young, and he's very successful already. He is actually the nephew of my classmate, Ganon kalayo agwat namin. So, and he's very articulate, So, and aside from that, I think Anjali and Holly are very articulate also. And I think that success in architecture revolves around communication skills. More than design skills,
Thank you
Look
po
at,
for that, Architect. And we are
Thank
also
you
happy
po.
na nagkita po kayo dito ni Architect Aldo, dito po sa ating live stream. Thank you po.
yes.
Reunion.
Do you know that? Do you know that all the famous architects in the world, they're excellent communicators, right? So that's the key.
Wow.
So I think all of you are going to succeed in architecture. You know, the
Thank you
topic
po.
which was shared to me by Anjali is very hard. Matter of fact, this is the first time I'm ever making a presentation on this topic, no? Now I
Yes
have
po,
to share my
Architect. We
screen.
we would like to learn po from you anything na ma-input niyo po sa amin. We are so honored to learn po from you. And thank you po once again for accepting our invitation, of course, dito sa ating Architecturo webinar.
So is my screen showing somewhere something, no?
Yes,
Ay,
there
ayan
you
na
go
po.
po, Architect. Kita po.
Okay, good. Kasi lumaki ako na wala pang computers kaya medyo I am a
Alright.
struggling technical guy, no?
Alright po, Architect.
So
You may
anyway,
proceed na po.
okay. Sige. So I
Okay
think
po.
a good shout out to Anjali because she was persistent in communicating with me about this topic. And I start out with this, no? What is the future of Philippine architecture? It is like a question in Miss Universe contest, no? In other words, wow, how do you answer that? I was even thinking that, first of all, we don't even know what Philippine architecture is all about. Several years ago, I attended a ArcAsia convention. ArcAsia is the association of the different architectural associations around Asia. No? So every year before COVID, or every 2 years, we usually gather around. And one such convention, the topic was vernacular architecture. And everybody was sharing their point, etc., etc. And the discussion, what got so heated, that the moderator of the session was having a hard time controlling the time. At the end of that session, they reached the following decision. No? If we discuss vernacular architecture, or even more specifically, what is Philippine architecture, we will go on and on and on. The two iconic architects which we have in the Philippines, architect Locsin and architect Babin Manyosa, do Philippine architecture. But look at how their products of Philippine architecture. It actually is worlds apart. No? One is modern, one is more or less relatable in terms of form. No? So there, it's very hard to define Philippine architecture. And much worse, it's even very hard to define what is the future of Filipino architecture. So imagine this talk is like the answer to this question if I was a Miss Universe contestant. No? What is the future of Philippine architecture? Medyo mahaba yung sagot, pero I will try to answer that question. So, let us look first at this. I'm glad that architect Aldo talked about the past. If you look at the upper picture, that is Stonehenge. Stonehenge was built something like 5,000 years ago during the Stone Age. The designers and the builders of those rocks or those stones had no idea what the future of society would be, much less the future of structures would be. So they built according to what they had the need for at the time. And now, when we look at Stonehenge, we are trying to guess what exactly was that type of structure. Some people say that maybe it was a burial ground, maybe it was a ceremonial space. People say it was like a calendar because in between two of those rocks is where the summer solstice sun would actually rise directly. So, and even some people thought that maybe these were built by aliens because look at the size of the rocks. They are not available in the area. Matter of fact, one of the types of rocks there come from quite a distant location, and you have to get there by sea. No, so really we look at this structure in retrospect and try to analyze. Little did the people of Stonehenge know that 5,000 years later, we have another iconic building which looks like Stonehenge, no? The Marina Bay Sands, no? And we look at it. Of course, we know what it's all about. We know how it works. We know how it looks like. We know why it's there. But maybe 5,000 years later on, the people, 5,000 years later on, we look at Marina Bay Sands and say, wow, those people were really primitive, no? The architecture they did was so archaic, no? So really, it is the future which will judge our architecture and whether our architecture has actually conformed to the current needs of that day and if it is sustained until the future. No? So the future starts today. Why? Because it is us architects who actually create the future in terms of structures. So the flow I will go through today starts with the evolution. Very quick evolution, don't worry, it's not nosebleed. It's very simple. Then we look at the crystal ball. Okay, ano kaya ang future natin? No? I call it crystal ball because it's anybody's guess. Then we'll break down the building into the components and see which of the components, whether form, function, or materials, will actually spell out the future of Philippine architecture. Then we'll go into a bit of trends today. 3 projects which I have worked on. And then let's go to the future, into the unknown. Okay. So let's start with the evolution. Evolution in the Philippines is very simple, no? And it's all in all the architectural history books. So we start out with the Bahay Kubo, no? Being in the Philippines, a tropical country, rich in bamboo, wood, rich in nipa. So therefore, the houses built at that time were of bamboo and nipa. It was very hot, so therefore, a thatch roof would have been perfect for the climate at that time. The Spaniards arrived. They saw the Bahay Kubo. People were living on the upper floor so that it was much cooler. Removed from the ground so that they do not get affected by humidity. And they decided, okay, it's a nice and applicable housing type. Let's do the same, similar, but let's put stone on the ground floor so we can have storage and it's more durable against earthquakes. We still live on the second floor, but instead of having a floor which is made of bamboo slats where the air can come even from below, since our flooring is solid, let's make the windows bigger. And they created the ventanilla so that they can have a lot of ventilation. And since it's also hot, they thought that since there is clay in the Philippines, let's make clay roof tiles. And to replace the thatch, it will be more durable. It will not blow away with the typhoon. It will be cooler. And of course, no, it's actually locally made. No? They don't have to import it from anywhere else. Then the Americans came and they came up with the bungalow, which was made of CHB, concrete hollow blocks, and metal sheets. No, you can see most of these projects, houses were done in the projects, like Project 6, Project 7, Project 8. Right after there was the Commonwealth, they needed housing right after the war, and this was the housing type introduced in those areas. However, if you look at the evolution, parang there's something wrong with the third transition from bahay kubo to bahay na bato. So therefore, we are now challenged to find out and to discover or even to create what is the next step in the evolution of Philippine architecture. What is the future of Philippine architecture? That is the big question. So what is the role of an architect in order to create that future of architecture? Well, first of all, we have to design shelters that are adapted to the time, the location, the resources, the culture and the comfort of the people. No? So adapted to the time. So yung ginawa ng bahay kubo yun, tamang-tama lang yan. That's good. And then the location where we are in the tropics, we have all of these cyclones, typhoons, etc. It's hot, etc. So we have to get designed according to that. So we will have to adapt to the time. That's why in order to create the architecture of the future, we have to create a shelter which is adapted to the time in which we are going to be building it on. And then, let's look at the future. Crystal ball. The problem with the future is as follows, and this is the quote from Sir Norman Foster. He said that as an architect, you design for the present with an awareness of the past for a future that is essentially unknown. Hirap, The challenge for architects, Madali lang yung first part. We design for the present because we know the parameters of the present. Madali lang mag-design with the awareness of the past kasi nangyari na. We can look back. We can learn lessons from the past. We can get the best practices and apply it to the structures of today. But what about the future? We do not know. How are we going to progress in this world? The challenge to sustainability in this world is actually threatened by 4 aspects. First is eco-threat. Right now, we're experiencing part of that, The concept, the threat of climate change, It is actually threatening our world, threatening our sustainability. Then we have the bio-threat, and we are actually experiencing that also right now, You have this virus, COVID virus, which is affecting the whole world. And that is also threatening our sustainability. We have techno threat. We are actually being run by the internet, by machines. And we also have terror threat. There is the Israel Palestinian war. Right now, even in our grounds, our home grounds, we have the problem with the Western Philippine Sea with China. So these are all threatening our world. And these threats, if they can continue, will actually spell out a possible future scenario for our world. For example, climate change. We know that global warming is around, increase of temperature because of greenhouse gases, therefore rising of sea levels. Maybe our world might be like this, no? Our high-rise structures, which are mostly in cities which are near the coast, will be underwater. Therefore, it might be like a ruin. It might actually look like Stonehenge. And maybe civilization at this time, when we already have the full effects of climate change, we might all be in the mountains on high ground. No? That means we have to start creating, thinking how are we going to create that human shelter, that human community in the mountains. Terror threat. What if because of itchy fingers, the US or China push that button to launch nuclear missiles or rockets, and we actually destroy actually the whole world? The whole surface of the world will be actually contaminated by radiation, and therefore it will not be safe to live even on ground. Maybe this is where we start having to live underground, creating subterranean living structures where we're going to live in safety, no? And hope that eventually, after many years, the radiation effects of the world will disappear. No? Again, that is something we have to look into just in case this happens. We also have the bio threat. COVID. I don't know, maybe most of you are not vaccinated, but I am vaccinated already because I am a senior. No? We have priority. But we don't know the long-term effects of these threats. We don't even know the long-term effects of the vaccination. No? We might actually be eventually little by little developing mutants. No? And because of mutants and normal human beings, we might end up having to create civilizations which have the wall. No? A wall which divides the mutants and the normal people. No? And therefore, we'll have to live within that wall, to be sustainable within that wall, and to make sure that civilization does not get overrun by the mutants. Techno threat, another dangerous thing. No? What if robots, because of artificial intelligence, start controlling us instead of us controlling them? Then we're going to have to look for ways on how to survive in this particular case. No? It's good if the robots are going to be nice and friendly, but if the robots turn against humanity, then we'll have to create off-grid places to stay in, to live in, so that they cannot find us with all the technology they have. Okay, these are all possible scenarios, and this is all possible ways in which society might have to be in the future. But it's not all that bad. No? What if also aliens invade us? No? Then it's going to be another complication. But how are we going to design our civilizations in this situation? Ideally, if we pursue sustainability, we may have a beautiful future. In the past, they used to use a term called utopia, the ideal community, the ideal world, in which there is symbiosis between nature and technology. And this is exactly what we have to aim for and have to hope for. No? That's why I think the conclusion of this first crystal part, this first part, is the future of architecture is what we create. Remember, we cannot ask ourselves that question, what is the future of Philippine architecture? Why? Because we are the architects. We are going to be the ones to create this future. But whatever we create, if we don't want to have the scenario of those 4 or 5, if you include alien invasion scenarios, if you don't have to have the effect of those scenarios, then let's start making sure that we start designing a world. We start designing architecture that is a symbiosis of nature and technology. Now we go to the components. So let's analyze it. Let's break it down. No? Okay. So components of architecture, you have form, you have function, and you have the materials. So let's explore. No? Which of these 3 will actually dictate what the future of Philippine architecture is going to be? Form, of course, and this is also going to be done in a way that at the whatever we design works with the conditions in the Philippines. In the Philippines, we have typhoons, earthquakes, volcanoes, and heat. We have to design for this. Form is a very contested issue. No? Matter of fact, there are so many people have made so many philosophies about form. No? These 3 I picked up from all sorts of locations. No? Form follows function. I've heard that so many times. No? Form follows culture. The first time I heard this was from Bobby Manyosa when he was still alive, no? In one of his lectures. And form follows budget. I found this in the Facebook, no? Which is actually very true. No? Kung anong budget ng kliyente, yun ang mangyayari sa form. No? There are people who have even exposed it more. No? Form follows form, not function. No? Another one, no? Form follows profit. And this is the aesthetic principle of our times, no? Again, related to budget. Meron pang contradictory, no? Less is more. And less is a bore, no? So if you can see, form is very fickle. I look at form to be stylistic whims. It's like the fashion, no? What we wear today is different from what we were wearing 10 years ago, what we were wearing 20 years ago. And it's going to be different what we're going to wear 10 years from now. Architecture has gone through so many different styles. No? And I'd like to show you a sort of a cartoon on how form changes in this world. No? In the first slide, no, you see here, you have a modern international style building, and here you have a vernacular architecture building. It says 1970s. No, it's maybe too small, but anyway, 1970s. So, in the 1970s, everybody was looking at, oh, international style. Oh, this is progressive. This is in. Oh, it looks great. And then when you look at vernacular architecture, you say, oh, it's inappropriate and doesn't work. 10 years later, everybody is now copying international style. Kasi everybody looks great. And all the architects are starting to copy indiscriminately. So people start looking at vernacular architecture kasi nababore na sila sa everybody's doing the same thing. No? Maybe they say that maybe vernacular architecture is probably worth looking at. And then 10 years later, everybody's doing vernacular architecture. And they say, oh, forget about international architecture, doesn't work anymore. Then later, everybody starts copying vernacular architecture. And then people start swinging back to, oh, let's look at, again, modern style again. No? Everybody's doing the same thing now. Let's look at something different. No? So I think form is going to be wishy-washy. It's going to be a stylistic whim. It will change, and therefore, let's see. No, I don't think it's going to be a something which we can use to predict the future. No? It's like a pendulum. No, swings back and forth, whether it's modern style, going back to look at vernacular architecture, and everything in between. No? Let's look at function. The function of the building is usually primarily, since we are designing for people, we have to look at human comfort. Again, because we're designing for people, we have to design so that our structures, actually are adjusted to the culture and the lifestyles of the people we're designing for. And finally, because we owe and have a responsibility to nature, we have to make sure that our buildings or what we create is going to be sustainable. No? Nowadays, we talk so much about sustainability because of the challenge and the threat of climate change. Maybe I wouldn't call it a threat anymore because we're already experiencing part of it, global warming. No? And many people do not understand what is the connection between climate change and our lifestyle. But here, I will share you shortly, very short, how these things are connected. No? Our lifestyles have changed. In the beginning, civilization, we used to live during the day when there was natural light, and we would sleep at night because we didn't have electricity. But now, we are always plugged in, hooked in, connected. We need power. And because of that, we need energy to make our lifestyles work. That energy currently is electricity, is being created by fossil fuel power plants, diesel powered fuel plants. These plants throw out a lot of carbon emissions into the air. That is greenhouse gases. Greenhouse gases causes global warming. Global warming causes climate change. And climate change causes our increased intensity of disasters. If you look at this set of cause and effect relationships, you'll notice that in the beginning, it's lifestyle and energy, which actually is the main cause of greenhouse gases. Therefore, we can look at doing buildings so that we can do more energy efficient buildings. Then we are on our way somehow to reduce the impact of climate change in the world. That's why it's very important to be sustainable. It's very important to look into ways to reduce greenhouse gases, especially those in the building industry. No? And that is all of us. No? Blame the buildings. It's half of the greenhouse gases is caused by the buildings, in the way we build our buildings, in the materials we use for our buildings, in the amount of energy we actually use to power up our buildings. The other two is industry and transportation, but that's only 1/4 each. No? So really, nasa atin yan. We have the biggest responsibility to reduce greenhouse gases. So what is green architecture? It is not a look. It is not a style. It is a function. So therefore, when people say, especially I know, I heard that architect Aldo was talking about thesis, don't create a green architecture look. It doesn't exist. Green architecture is a function. If you can reduce energy, if you can make it more water efficient, if you can make it comfortable for the people, if you can make sure that it is actually going to be sustainable, then that is a function of the building. It is not a look. And I would define green architecture as this in its simplest way. Is green architecture is designing with nature. Why? Because when we build in nature, which is perfectly sustainable, we have to design with its cycles. No? Sustainability is the capacity of human society to continue indefinitely within the Earth's natural cycles. There are cycles in nature, di ba? Winter, spring, summer, and fall. There is the rotation of the sun, the Earth around the sun. These are all cycles. We exhale carbon dioxide. The plants, through a process of photosynthesis, get that and make it into oxygen. Symbiotic relationships. So we have to go green, definitely. That is our responsibility. And I'll show you very quickly a very simple formula on how to do practical green structures. I believe that practical green is a foundation of all sustainable designs. Okay, so there are only two steps in creating a simple, practical green structure. First is working with nature, and second is assisting nature. First, you work with nature because that's what's given to you. And then when nature cannot provide because of our lifestyles, then we assist nature to cater to our lifestyles. So what is working with nature? First, we analyze the site. What is the site giving us? What is the environment? What is the climate? Etc., etc. What is orientation? And from there, we design the building envelope with respect to the sun pattern, with respect to the wind pattern, to observe where natural light is, maximizing natural light, avoiding heat for comfort. Then we look at water. What is the rainfall there? Can we actually recycle water? Can we capture rainwater? Can we grow food? If we cannot grow food horizontally, maybe we can do vertical farming. And finally, looking at materials which are actually available locally or which are actually durable and sustainable. And second step, assisting nature. Okay, we have to look at ways to cool our structure, maybe a combination of fans and energy efficient air conditioning. Look at artificial light, which is energy efficient, and look at the option of renewable energy. Okay, so I think we should do this for all buildings. Matter of fact, if you're doing when you do your thesis or any plate for that matter, start practicing this checklist. Start doing all projects in a green way, in a very practical green way. No? In fact, when I give lectures to the architects, I tell them, no, even if the client does not require that the building is green, apply practical green. Because it is our responsibility not only to the client, but it is our responsibility to society in general. It is our responsibility to the world that we do and create sustainable and green structures or buildings. No? Plug in muna. This is my advocacy for more than 15 years. No? Green architecture, sustainable architecture. So I actually put up a Facebook page in which I actually post a lot of links and also original tips on how to be green. No? So it's facebook.com/pracgreen, short for practical green. No? I try my best to, it's a very active Facebook page. I post at least six original posts per week. I give myself a break on a Sunday, and I try my best to post 2 links a day, no? So that at least you keep on checking it because there's always something new there. No? Now we go to the third component, materials. Can materials spell the future of Philippine architecture? Ideally, materials should be locally available. Well, they have to be available in the first place because if they're not available, how are we going to build? No? We need those materials available. Either they're shipped over or they're locally available. Then we have to look for materials which are looking at appropriate technology. In other words, sometimes when we import materials, we have to ask, no? Or find out or do research. Where does that material come from? Which country? What is the climate there? Is it appropriate for a tropical climate for us, like in the Philippines? Is it appropriate for a typhoon, earthquakes? So we can check, no? And therefore use only that what is appropriate. And of course, ideally, we should use renewable resources, no? Materials rather. So what do we have? Let's go over the materials which you have. No? Bamboo is very prevalent. Yes, we have that. We actually built the bahay kubos in bamboo. No? But bamboo is not only for the poles in the structure. We can actually use it for the roof. And if you look at the picture on the right here, you can see a very creative way of creating a panel using bamboo as the core. No? This could be a panel door. This could be a panel for the building. Putting a plywood on both sides of that bamboo. No? You can also use bamboo reinforced concrete. Bamboo reinforced concrete is actually using a mesh or creating a mesh of bamboo and then plastering it with concrete. No? It works along the lines of what is known as ferroconcrete. Now, ferroconcrete is a metal mesh which we can form in different ways. We can even do free form and plastering it on both sides. No? You know, I know the guy who actually was pushing bamboo reinforced concrete in the Philippines in the 70s. His name was architect 𝐎𝐧𝐥𝐢𝐧𝐞 𝐋𝐞𝐬. Now he's very, very, very old. He actually built a sample house in NHA, National Housing Authority. He got approval from NHA, but there were no takers. No, and I think it's a very interesting concept. No, I think we can still revive this using bamboo reinforced concrete. No, we have a lot of clay. Matter of fact, the Spaniards, when they came here, they realized that we have clay. They started creating bricks, creating roof tiles, and creating floor tiles like the vegan tiles. No? So we have all of these materials. the Philippines. Okay, concrete is actually very easy to find. It just needs limestone, little fly ash, sand, cement, water, and you can actually do a lot of things. So cement is actually a very durable material because once it's cast, and if you don't paint it, you can actually have it almost virtually maintenance free. That's what neo-brutalist structures are coming up with, no? Or I think they call it now industrial look, no? So with texture, with lines, with the shadows, you create interesting looks, no? Nowadays, since there is a lumber ban, cutting trees ban, then we are left with small little chips of wood, or we are left with old wood, no? Or we can have bamboo, no? So there is this material which is called laminated wood. If it's with bamboo, they call it lambu. Okay, in other words, with the small little bits of wood, we can compress it together and laminate together, and we can bring back lumber, which we can use for structures. No, it can be 2x2, 2x4, 2x6, a 4x4 column. We can all do that, and bring back old wood so that they can be reused again. No? This is a very renewable material. No? Rammed earth is something which we can do also in the Philippines because we have soil, we have clay, we need sand, maybe a certain perch of cement. And what we do is actually just layer it every 10 centimeters, compact it with forms on both sides, and we actually can create very interesting structures. Every year, we burn the rice stalks after harvesting the rice. But there is a concept called straw bale construction, which we can actually look into. We compress that rice stalks and then make it to building blocks. No? And of course, since we always complain about plastics all over the place, let's not look at it as something which is absolutely bad. Let's collect it, compress it, melt it, and we can start creating building blocks. It's almost like a joke, the picture. It's like Lego blocks, but actually we can actually use shredded plastics, mix it with cement, sand, and create actually blocks. So all of these are possible, no? And some years ago, I actually gave a lecture about the future of Philippine architecture also in a way, but I said the following. Maybe, just maybe, the future of Philippine architecture is going to revolve around how creative architects today look at the local materials and tweak it in a very creative way so that we start having interesting forms, interesting structures made out of created use of local materials, such that the future of Philippine architecture is actually revolves around materials, local materials. And can you imagine if we start doing that, we will be a country which will be completely reliant on ourselves with respect to building materials. We don't have to wait for imported materials because we're going to use the materials which we have locally. No? So to wrap up this section, I think the future of Philippine architecture is not going to be a form. Remember, form can vary, but it will be a function of sustainability. Definitely, since we have felt the impact of climate change and we have felt the impact of bio threat, we are going to look more and more into sustainability. And we have at our doorstep the threat of terror. And therefore, we have to look at that. And of course, it might also be, as I mentioned earlier, an expression of local material. So this might be the future of Philippine architecture. Some projects, some trends. Okay, people are looking back at bamboo, tweaking bamboo. This is a project, built in Puerto Princesa. This is a zero-carbon resort demonstration cottage. No? This is actually looking at bamboo, but implementing modern technology into it. No? So, starting off, no? Look at this roof. It is a butterfly roof, tilted on one side. And because of that, you don't need gutters. All the water coming from the roof is going to end up in one single point, right here, right here. And therefore, you can collect all the rainwater, goes down into that rainwater container there. No? Interesting new technologies. Bamboo. Now, what do we do? Instead of putting the bamboo straight into the ground, put a concrete base, put the bamboo, but always there's a connector, because if bamboo is in contact with water and sun, it will quickly deteriorate. Therefore, in this project, we have steel pipes as a connector between the concrete and the bamboo, such that when you have the bamboo, you just slip the bamboo into those steel pipes. Notice that it's not single column. It's always bundled together. Why? Why is this new technology composed of bundled bamboo? Also this one, look at this beam, bundled bamboo. It's because bamboo is organic. And sometimes one node, because maybe there was a lack of water at the time, is weaker. So therefore, the other elements in the bundled bamboo can actually make up for that weakness. And if it's destroyed, or if it deteriorates fast, you can remove one piece, the structure will not fall down, slip in a new piece, and tie it up again. No? This is more a closer look at the bundled bamboo. No? So this is like the beam under the house, and it's made of 3 bamboos tied together. No? That's bundled bamboo. No? The other interesting development is housing. This is a competition in the Clark Green City. It's called Inclusive Housing. And I was part of that jury. There's an international jury. And this is the entity which won. No? What was different here? Normally, when you do a housing today, when you do housing, you put the roads, you subdivide the lots, then you put the buildings. Now this guy did something different, and this is exactly what would spell the future. This whole project focused on people priority. The ground floor or ground level was given to the roads. So that's where you have roads, that's where you can park. Now the places where the people can move is actually the podium above the parking areas and on the roof deck of the buildings. And guess what? All the buildings are connected completely. It's like a snake moving throughout the whole development, such that if you go up to the top of the roof deck, you can just keep on walking through the gardens and then go down to your unit. You never have to cross a road. No? So that is an interesting development. In other words, if we start designing the future for people more than for vehicles, then we start developing a different type of building typology, no? which is actually shown in this competition entry, no? which won. No? Actually, just a side story. There were 2 entries left in the final decision, which is up for discussion now. No? It was this and another competition and another entry, which actually had what I said earlier. It had the roads and it had the buildings. And then before from you to get from one building to the other, of course you have to cross the road. No? And big argument there, no? Because they were saying that, oh, the one with the roads is cheaper, no? Because it's cheaper, you just build the roads, you just focus on the houses. But I said, if you're going to do a competition, why are we putting out ideas which we already have seen, which already have tried? Why don't you throw in ideas which have not been seen yet? And therefore, after that argument, more and more people agreed that this entry should be the winner, and it actually won. No? The last one is a wild idea. You know, I did just like architect Aldo mentioned earlier, I also did a pro bono, a sustainable village in Javier Leyte for the victims of Typhoon Pablo, victims of Typhoon Yolanda. And of course, I went there to see the site, and it was a sorry state of conditions when I went there. No, I could see the disaster. It was already 6 months after the disaster, and I could see that people were still living in very, very difficult situations. And I went there. I designed the thing, and I thought, if we can have this storm surge, what could be an ultimate way to design a village which will be sort of resilient to all of these things? So I thought of this concept. I call the sustainable mountain village. Now, because in nature, it's like biomimicry. You don't see blocks in nature. You see hills, mounds, etc. There are no 90-degree elements in nature. No? So I thought my inspirations could come from this. No? First, the Hotung village in China. These are villages in which, to protect themselves, they have walls on the outer part of their village, and the whole village looks in towards a common space. The second idea I got is from Batanes. In Batanes, one of the things which they have there is this low wall. I don't know if you can see this low wall before the house. That is a wind deflector. No? So the wind comes, it hits that wall. It's normally at least half of the house height of the wall of the house, so that the wind is pushed up and deflected, and it goes along the slope of the roof. The wind never hits that wall. No? So in other words, it's deflecting the wind. And of course, this modern thing of stealth aircraft, it's angled such a way that radar cannot actually detect it. No? So I thought, what if I create a mound like this? One village. Okay. Putting a mound, outer wall, if you can see that there, around, so that it takes wind, typhoon, or even storm surges. There's an opening here. You can enter here. And then the structures are here. The structures are actually lifted from the ground. This is the entrance area, and you have a common space in between. No? Why are the structures above ground? Just in case water leaks in, it can stay here, and you're still protected above. No? There's an open space in the middle. You can have everything you need for life here: water, food, etc. No? And then I thought, if there's a storm surge, which we already know, typhoon's coming, with all our technology, we know it's coming already, even days ahead, then you can just close the hatch here. You can cover the roof, no? So that whether there's wind or water, it will just wash over that mound, no? It's almost like a science fiction movie. Even the structure, I thought, instead of having the typical post and lintel, meaning 45 degrees column, I thought, what if the whole structure was a truss? This is a big truss, giant truss. It's already working on the forces which is coming here. And not only that, my foundation is mimicking the mangroves. No? Mangroves, instead of having just one footing down there, it goes in two different ways, no? So that it keeps more stable. No? So this is just an idea which I had. And I thought that maybe the trends today, there may be local materials. People are trying to look at our local materials again and trying to use it in a modern way. I think the people-centered design, which is starting to become more popular, I think that's a good trend, and I think that will help us in the future. Disaster resilience is a very, very important current trend right now, and that may go on into the future. Biomimicry is something which is a current trend. Everybody's looking at that. Parametric design, these are for all of those people who like computer-generated thing. Okay, it's starting to be popular. But sometimes I look at parametric design, maybe it's like that cartoon I showed you earlier. No? People will look at it, nice. Everybody start copying it, and we have so many parametric designs all over the place. People will go back to back to the other way. No? Floating architecture. I think there are more people looking to this right now. And of course, smart buildings, technology-driven buildings. But all of this, if you notice, all of these trends which I listed here, they all point to what direction? They're all looking at sustainability of the human race with respect to our built environment. So, into the unknown, let's try to craft in what is going to be the future of Philippine architecture. I posted this in my Facebook page in architecture because it was posted recently in another Facebook page. No? The future of architecture, should we look at it in anticipation, with anticipation, or should we look at it with apprehension? As architects, we should not look at the future with apprehension because we are the ones creating the built environment. Maybe the rest of the public may look at the future of architecture with apprehension because they are clueless, maybe, of what we probably can do. So we should look at the future of architecture with anticipation. We know the threats to society, we know the parameters, which I've discussed right now, and because of that, we can start anticipating the future, what we think of the future, and start creating our buildings, our structures, to actually anticipate those things. No? What is the future? I'm not going to, aside from these two pictures, I'm not going to show you images. Why? Because the future of architecture, how it looks, is dependent on you guys. I don't include myself in it anymore because I'm already old architect. I'm sort of on my way out. But you guys are going to create the future of architecture. What have we learned today? First of all, as an architect, our role is to create shelters that are adapted to the time, location, resources, culture, and comfort. So there, no? First lesson is that we should learn how to design shelter adapted to the time and the time which we are building that structure in. Second, the future of architecture is what we will create. It has to be a symbiosis of nature and technology. We cannot just go back in how we used to build before and just to stick to nature. We have to fuse the two, nature and technology. And we have to actually use what is known as appropriate technology. Technology which will work for us in the long run, in our climate and in our location in the world. Third, the future of Philippine architecture will not be a form, but it will be a function of sustainability and expression of local materials. So I would encourage you guys, start looking into the function of sustainability and I think this is going to be even very interesting for thesis projects, how to develop local materials into the next level and use it creatively, because then that will express truly buildings that were created in the Philippines by Filipino materials, by Filipino architects. I think that is an interesting thesis study. No? And fourth, there's the trends, of course, as I mentioned earlier, local materials, people-centered design, disaster resilience, biomimicry, parametric design, floating architecture, smart buildings, but everything revolves around sustainable design. Okay, so that is going to be the future function. So finally, I think we architects, we have a responsibility to society and nature. That is why we have a license, no? That's why architecture is a licensed profession, because we have to ensure the safety of society through the structures we create, the built environment and create. And we have to also be responsible that we build our structures that do not antagonize or even make nature, to destroy nature, no? And not following its cycles, no? And that response to our responsibility to society, that response to our responsibility to nature is going to create the future. So in response to that Miss Universe question, what is the future of Filipino architecture? My short response is this. The future of Philippine architecture is responsible architecture. I believe responsible architecture encompasses everything I have mentioned today. That is the use of materials, that is sustainability, that is make sure that there is a symbiosis between nature, etc., etc. Bottom line is that we, as architects, we have to exercise our craft responsibly, attuned to the times, and making sure that people and nature survive in centuries to come. So with that, maraming salamat po. And if you want, aside from the Green Architecture Facebook page, I have another Facebook page. It's called facebook.com/arkmike. This is where I post all the other issues related to the profession. And I have a series which I post here in Arkimike, which is called Professional Practice Tips. And this is related to the practice. So with that, I hope that all of you will become responsible architects and will practice responsible architecture, because I believe the future of Philippine architecture is going to be responsible architecture. Maraming salamat po.
Yes, wow, very, thank you so much po, Architect. Dahil talagang nakakabusog po yung naging talk nyo for today. Thank you so much po, Architect Guerrero, kasi kahit very challenging nga yung naging topic natin for today is talagang nakakabusog yung mga information, mga tips and ideas na i-share nyo po sa amin, Architect. Ako po, while pinapakinggan ko po talaga kayo, is marami po ako natutunan. Ilan na po dyan is, syempre, as an architect, ito talaga, we design for the present with an awareness of the past and for a future that is essentially unknown. Kumbaga, lumalabas na almost halos all-knowing na dapat tayong mga architects, which is very nakaka-pressure, pero at the same time, responsibility kasi natin yon. And also, syempre, we design to solve a certain problem and at the same time to prevent a problem from occurring in the future. Kumbaga, yun naman talaga yung essence ng pagde-design natin bilang professionals. And also, architect, I love the fact that green architecture is the solution to future building and development projects. And syempre, we hope to reach more people and educate them and raise awareness about this type of architecture po. Syempre, while listening to your talk po, similar din kay Architect Aldo, nakaramdam ako personally, I felt the pressure and challenges of having the future of architecture in our hands bilang kami yung mga susunod na henerasyon ng mga arkitekto. Pero at the same time, syempre we should aspire to be someone na makapag-contribute for the betterment of the future. Talaga namang maganda din na nanonood tayo ng mga ganitong katulad na webinar, 'di ba? Para mas marami tayong natututunan. Yes, ikaw naman ba, partner?
Ayun, I agree with your message, Ate Angeli. Tapos yung pinaka tumatak sa akin na sinabi ni architect is, yung future of architecture is what we create. So, kumbaga, as an architect, kailangan natin i-integrate yung surroundings natin with the progressing technology. Hindi pwede yung lagi lang tayong nakadepende dun sa kung ano yung standard. Kasi, yung world natin is consistently changing. So, dapat, kung ano yung nag-change sa mundo natin, dun dapat tayo nakabase kung paano natin gagawin at i-apply yung architectural styles and things sa atin. Yon. So ngayon, it's time for us to entertain some of our viewers' sentiments and questions. Ayan. First, let's start with Joshua Luis Sanchez. Sabi niya po architect, incoming freshie po siya, tapos na-feel niya po na parang nasa klase po siya. So sobrang galing niya po, ganon. Ayun. Next up po is tanong po ni Ate Angeli is, how can we incorporate traditional design or styles while adapting to the modern era?
Okay. By the way, if you were the judges in the Miss Universe contest, and yung sagot ko yung sa tanong nyo is, what is future film architecture? Mananalo ba ako?
Of course naman, architect.
Haba ng question. Nakalimutan ko mag-add yan eh. The future of architecture is actually responsible architecture and world peace. Yan yung palagi sinasabi sa Miss Universe, di ba? Okay. To answer the question of Danielle, how can we incorporate traditional design or styles while adapting to the modern era? Well, it actually revolves around materials, no? As I mentioned earlier, because we have a lot of traditional materials in the Philippines, no? Actually, some of them have not even been explored so much, like soil, like rammed earth construction, no? So, if you want to incorporate the traditional design, start out with the materials, analyze and understand the materials. Like, for example, let's take the issue of bamboo, no? Bamboo is very common. It actually spells out traditional architecture. Whatever, if you want to use technology, there are many ways now of preserving bamboo. How do you preserve bamboo so that it lasts for many years, no? Not only that, as I showed you earlier also, that bamboo can actually tweak to become bamboo reinforced concrete. Okay, so there you already have a step forward from just bamboo, what you can see. It is actually bamboo inside concrete, and therefore it is actually applying local design and local materials and the technology, no? So there you have to try to always blend local materials and look for the future technology. Like in the house I showed you, no? Instead of using bamboo and sticking it on the ground, we actually have bamboo which is actually inserted in steel poles and on a concrete base, no? So that is one. That's why I said the future Philippine architecture could be based along the tweaking of our local materials, adapting technology. Now, the second one is the look. If you want to incorporate traditional look and styles, alam mo na yan. I said form is wishy-washy, is stylistic whim. So we can always design using those materials and make it look like Ifugao house. Maybe make it look like a Bahay Kubo. Maybe make it look like a Maranao house, etc. It's up to us. No? That one is actually up to us. That is why the two iconic architects who I always look up to, Bobby Banyosa and Leandro Locsin, they try to do Philippine architecture, but you can see how diverse the looks are, di ba? But the essence is there. The materials is there. So I hope, Danielle, that answers the question. But please explore local materials, because I think your creativity, your generation of architects, your creativity is going to spell a big difference in the future of Philippine architecture through materials.
Ayun. Thank you po for answering that question, Architect. Next question po is from Mr. John Doe. How can we achieve sustainable architecture in the community with a limited budget?
Oh, thank you, Mr. John Doe. You know, practical green actually doesn't cost any much more than a regular construction. No? For example, if you place a window on the north or on the west, that is the same cost. But if you put that window on the west, you will have the west sun coming in, making that building very hot, and therefore you will be uncomfortable, you might get sick, and you need a stronger aircon to keep yourself cool. But if you put that window on the north, you will have daylight, and at the same time, you're cool, no? So in other words, that list, actually, Mr. Jando, you go to my Facebook page of Green Architecture and look up what I call 10 steps to sustainability. It's all there. Block the sun, let the light in, catch the breeze, insulate the roof. These are very simple steps to come out to the green home or green design. There's no excessive cost above a normal construction, and yet they are the foundations of sustainable design. If you do not do those 10 steps, you cannot have a sustainable design building, even if you add other technology there. No? So really, that is one of the struggles I've had over the last 15 years, no? To convince the public that green architecture and sustainable architecture is not necessarily expensive. It can actually be even cheaper sometimes, and in the long run, for sure, it is going to offset any incremental costs you actually put in the beginning. So Mr. Jando, may assignment ka, puntahan mo yung Facebook page ko, hanapin mo ng 10 steps to sustainability. Salamat.
Ayan. Thank you po ulit for answering that question. Ayan, Jando, alam mo na gagawin mo, ha? Ayan, next question po is from Remlock Official. What can you say to aspiring architects who would like to pursue green architecture as well?
You know, I was thinking that Remlock, no? Hindi pala tao yan. Remlock Official. Anyway, I encourage everyone to pursue green architecture. Everyone. Because that is our responsibility as an architect. You have to make sure that you blend in nature and technology for the requirements of people, no? But you have to have a basis, of course, no? It's good to like it, but you have to have a basis, no? So if you want to pursue green architecture, learn about it. You know that you guys with the internet, it's so easy to find out about green architecture. Google it. Matter of fact, if you want a very interesting YouTube channel, I would even recommend a YouTube channel called Sustainability Illustrated. Ang ganda, parang cartoons yan, pero it explains it very, 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 very well. And it's only 5 minutes, 10 minutes sections. So therefore, you get an idea about that. But important thing is if you want to pursue green architecture, make sure you do a lot of reading, do a lot of research, so you know what are the components of green architecture. And I think everyone should do that, no? And of course, you can always go to my Facebook page. Nandyan lahat ng
Ayun.
links dyan.
Mm-mm. Ayan, I hope that answers your question, Mr. Remlock or Miss. Ayan, we have also next question from Ate Angeli ulit. How can we solve Metro Manila City from the overly populated built structures and worsening pollution, knowing that there are little to no green spaces available in the metropolitan?
Thank you, Daniel. If you become the mayor, governor, or president of the Philippines, we can do that. Why? The biggest problem of solving the problems of Metro Manila is political will. There are so many studies from city planners, urban planners, architects, so many concepts on how to improve Metro Manila, no? Just give a simple example, no? The idea that all of these horizontal developments, compress them a bit, make them medium rise, and therefore you clear up open spaces already around it, no? So there's so many, no? There are so many solutions, no? So really, at the end of the day, and attended so many symposiums about how to solve these problems, etc. Balik na naman palagi diyan sa ano, do we have the political will to actually get these things into motion? Isa pa, yung politics, no? You know, the LGU law, have you heard about the LGU law? It makes the mayor of that LGU like the king of that place, no? Anything he says. So take a look at Metro Manila. Metro Manila is composed of so many LGUs. There are political boundaries. And therefore, sometimes they're not coordinated kasi one LGU wants one thing, the other LGU wants another thing, but they share the same boundary. So, what happens in a flood? For example, one case. In my LGU, there's a place in my LGU which have never flooded for the last 100 years. But this year, all of a sudden, bumaha. Bakit? Kasi yung kapitbahay ni LGU, yung isang low-lying area, finil nila. They filled it up. Kaya lahat ng tubig pumunta sa kabila. So, there, no? I told one time in a symposium, the LGUs, I said, take note, nature does not respect political boundaries. Okay, if a typhoon is going to come, a flood is going to come, it doesn't respect political boundaries. So please get your acts together. Kaya maganda yung ginawa ni the time of President Marcos. There was a governor of Metro Manila. Siya yung boss para ma-coordinate yung lahat Manila. What do we have today? We have MMDA. And what they say is advisory only. They cannot get people together. No? Kaya at the end of the day, political will. No? So Daniel, if you run for president, governor, or mayor, let me know. I will transfer to that district and I will vote for you. No? Because we really need politicians with vision, politicians willing to do political will to solve the problems which actually the solutions are already out there. No?
Tama. Sobrang agree ako doon, architect, grabe. Dapat nag-aano rin, parang nagmo-mold din yung political and mga political officers natin sa nangyayari dun sa environment natin. Kasi sobrang kailangan nun. Kasi dito tayo nakatira. Kung wala to, wala tayo. We're dead. Ayun, meron din po palang comment si Miss Kev Santiago. Sabi niya po, the vibe that we need in this kind of platform. No pressure. Thank you so much, architect, for the knowledge you've shared to us, aspiring architects. Ayan. Thank you daw, Kevs.
Hey, much welcome.
And I think we've accommodated all of our queries. So thank you again, architect Miguel Guerrero, for sharing with us your time and wisdom to help us know better about the future of Philippine architecture. At this juncture, we would like to give you the Certificate of Appreciation for being with us virtually today. This Certificate of Appreciation is hereby presented to Architect Miguel Guerrero for imparting their knowledge and insights as a guest speaker on the 5th episode of Arquitecturo, an online lecture series held this 23rd day of May 2021. as a part of Project TAV via YouTube live stream. Together, let's take a step forward. Signed by Daniel Angeli G. Pastrano, Architectura Head and CAOP Student Council Vice President, Ezekiel Joshua A. Punsalan, Project TAP Head and CAOP Student Council Auditor, and Ms. Trisha Danica L. Belizar, CAOP Student Council President. Ayan, thank you so much po, Architect, for sharing knowledge with us today and giving your time.
Thank you po, Architect. And guys, yung mga pin-login
Most
na Facebook
welcome.
pages ni Architect, yan, let's follow him on Facebook po. Ano po ulit yun, Architect?
So the Green Architecture is facebook.com/prackgreen, P, capital P, R-A-K, capital G-R-E-E-N, and then my general architecture page is facebook.com/Arkimike, capital A-R-K-I, capital M-I-K-E. No? Wow, galing. Both of you are excellent speakers. No? I think you can also be
Wow, thank you
politicians,
so
both of
much.
you. Huh? Pwede
No,
rin kayo maging
Architect,
politicians, ha?
ako rin po yung nag-comment na yung Daniel Angeli. Pero wala po akong balak tumakbo sa political field, Architect. Grabe naman yan. Pero thank you so much po, Architect. And of course, we hope to see you po in the future para po sa mga similar seminars like this. Thank you so much po once again, Architect. Thank you po.
Okay.
Thank you po.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Ayan, once again, thank you very much to both of our speakers, Architect Aldo Mayoralgo and Architect Miguel Guerrero. Grabe, sobrang iconic speakers, guest speakers, na ang dami nilang na-impart sa atin na knowledge and talagang sobrang fulfilling ng episode na ito. Thank you so much for being with us in this 5th episode of Architecturo. Ayan, so of course, also, i-share ko na lang rin, meron kasi tayong mga nare-receive na questions sa ating registration form na mga tanong na hindi related sa episode natin today, pero about sa architecture school, student life, mga ganon. So, hindi namin sila masasagot for today, unfortunately, but we would like to refer sa inyo ang aming Architecturo podcast. Ayan, meron kaming podcast sa aming YouTube channel. Just type in the search bar, Architecturo Podcast, and yan, kwentuhan kami dyan together with the Archi students ng PLM Architecture. Ayan. So, pwede nyo yung mapakinggan about, syempre, sa architecture school, Archi student life. Ayan. And please, let us know if nakatulong sa inyo yon in one way or another. Of course. Ayan. So, if you guys want more of webinars like this, don't forget to like our official Facebook page. It's PLM CAOP Student Council. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram. It's at CAOP-SC Official. And support our One View, One Step Forward campaign by subscribing and watching our videos. It's PLM Architecture here on YouTube. And to our viewers, we hope you have learned something useful in design philosophies and the projected future of Philippine architecture in today's webinar. Thank you so much for being with us. And please look forward to more of this in the next few months.
And we would highly appreciate if you guys will fill out our feedback form, which will be posted on our official Facebook page later this afternoon. Again, don't forget to answer our feedback form, guys. Also, we would like to express our gratitude to the PLM College of Education Student Council for partnering with us today in this month's episode of Architecturo. Thank you so much, everyone. I am Holy Marie Cyril Garcia.
Yes, thank you so much then, Miss Holly. And nag-enjoy ako sa pag-MC natin today. And yes, once again, this has been Angeli Pastrano, your host for Architecturo Episode 5. Bye! See you guys in the next few months.